Call this meeting to order. Hear ye, hear ye. Welcome to the May 24th Willits City Council meeting. We'll start with the pledge to the flag. Chief Carter, would you like to lead us in the pledge? Sure. Thank you.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. I heard a phone, just a reminder to everyone, if you could put those on mute, make sure they're not going to ring during the meeting. All right, Dolores, may we have a roll call, please?
Councilmember Strong? Here. Rodriguez?
Yes.
Stransky?
Yes.
Gonzalez?
Present.
Mayor Khan?
Yes, thank you. All right, we'll start with public communications. The city welcomes participation in its meetings. Comments shall be limited to 3 minutes per person so that everyone has an opportunity to speak. To expedite matters and avoid repetition, whenever any group of persons wishes to address the council on the same subject matter, the mayor may request the group appoint a spokesperson. This item is limited to matters under the jurisdiction of the city council, which are not on the posted agenda. Public criticism of the council, commission, boards, and agencies will not be prohibited. The city council can take no action on non-agendized items. Would anyone here tonight like to speak to the council? All right, please come to the dais and say your name for the record. You don't have to adjust the microphone, it's just there for the TV.
Oh, okay. My name is Ed Beals. I'm here to address the council about a certain house that I believe is a nuisance. I purchased a house last year. It's my first house. It's the best house. Sorry, it's not great at public speaking, but I noticed that the house next door is occupied by several squatters at any given time. I commonly and routinely find people using the bathroom in the yard. I'm pretty sure that there's some worse stuff going on in that house. And ordinarily, it wouldn't concern me at all, but I don't know. It seems like the police keep trying to do something about it, and then the people just move right back the very next day. And I called them to inform them, hey, I know you're having a problem with this house, and I do live right next door. It's affecting my property values, and people don't really want to come over anymore. And did some research into the house. I know it's owned by the Deutsche Bank, Germany and New York. The house address is 283. Current residence at 285 Sherwood Road. And I'd just like to know if there's anything that can be done about the house. It seems like the police know it's a problem and they're making attempts to correct the problem, but every time they kick somebody out, 10 more people move right back in. And it's a huge house. It's already been red listed, and I believe it's probably been a known squat house for at least 4 or 5 years. And I'm just wondering if there's anything that can be done about the house. It seems like it's already been red tagged, and there's still people coming and going all the time.
If I may, I talked with Dusty Bowles, our code enforcement officer, Davey Bowles, yesterday about this very house.
Oh.
And the city's well aware of this house.
Okay.
And I was told that it's gone up for auction. Deutsche Bank is trying to sell it, and they had it. They were hoping to get like $220,000 for it. There were no bidders in that neighborhood. I hear that the price is being lowered. It's going to go up for auction again.
Okay.
And so hopefully a responsible party will soon buy that house and solve this problem.
Oh, okay. Well, that's good. I did actually try to view the house myself. I noticed it was up for sale, and I tried to view the house and say, hey, I'm interested. Show me what you can show me. And the real estate agent told me that there's tenants currently occupying the house, that we're not allowed to disturb the tenants that are occupying the house. And they told me that I needed to make a bid on the house sight unseen. And viewing recent pictures of the inside of the house, it just hit the newspaper recently that the police did get involved in that house, and there were several dogs that were being unattended to. And it did hit the Willits News, or at least Willits Facebook news page, and the house is disgusting. So I wouldn't want to buy that house sight unseen. I'm pretty sure that nobody on the council would either. So I'm not sure how long it's going to take them to sell that house for any price. But I am glad to know that it is being sold.
And that is the property, for the benefit of the council, that was indirectly related to a legal action
Yeah.
with the city.
Definitely on our radar.
Yes.
So,
Okay,
Yeah.
all right.
We feel your pain.
Well, yeah, I'd just like to make a formal complaint, because I am the only neighbor to that house. And so.
And we've made numerous demands on Deutsche Bank to be responsible, and it's kind of falling on deaf ears. I think they did board the house up, only to have other people come in and occupy it again. And
Yeah.
so Deutsche Bank has not been the most responsible party to work with.
Okay, all right. Well, thank you very much for all your time and your efforts. I really appreciate it. I'll excuse myself now.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And you did well, public speaking.
Yes.
Yes.
All right, is there anybody else who would like to speak to the council on a non-agendized item? All right, we're going to move on to public matters. The first item tonight is a presentation of a proclamation recognizing May 21st through 27th as National Public Works Week. So, whereas public works professionals focus on infrastructure, facilities, and services that are of vital importance to sustainable and resilient communities and to the public health, high quality of life, and well-being of the people of the city of Willits. And whereas these infrastructure, facilities, and services could not be provided without the dedicated efforts of public works professionals who are engineers, managers, and employees at all levels of government and the private sector who are responsible for rebuilding, improving, and protecting our nation's transportation, water supply, water treatment, and solid waste systems, public buildings, and other structures and facilities essential for our citizens. And whereas it is in the public interest for the citizens, civic leaders, and children in the city of Willits to gain knowledge of and maintain an ongoing interest and understanding of the importance of public works and public works programs in their respective communities. And whereas the year 2023 marks the 63rd annual National Public Works Week, sponsored by the American Public Works Association, Canadian Public Works Association, be it now therefore resolved that the Willits City Council formally designates the week May 21 to 27, 2023 as National Public Works Week. We urge all citizens to enjoy with representatives of the American Public Works Association and government agencies in activities, events, and ceremonies designed to pay tribute to our awesome public works professionals, engineers, managers, and employees, and to recognize the substantial contributions they make to protecting our national health, safety, and quality of life. I caused the seal of the City of Willits to be affixed on this day. So thank you very much to our Public Works team. You guys do a fantastic job, and our city wouldn't be nearly as nice without you. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your leadership and continued support.
Absolutely. Thank you.
It looks like the Canadians even got behind this.
Yeah. Some fans in the far north. Is there anyone who would like to receive this proclamation, or are we? Come on, Kenan.
Kenan knew he was going to be accepting it, so.
The whole crew didn't want to come this evening?
I gave them the option, but I think
They need
going to
to.
celebrate at home.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, Kenan.
Kenan, while we're all resting and they're working early tomorrow morning, we'll be thinking of them in gratitude.
We'll be up with the sun.
All right, next up is a update, Little Lake Fire Protection District, from our Fire Chief Carter.
Andy, you know what it is? Oh. We all know I love public speaking. So anyways, first off, I'd like to thank the Mayor, Vice Mayor, Council members for letting me come in. Additionally, I'd like to apologize. I know I've been gone almost all year during your meetings. Trainings are starting to thin out a little bit, so I'll probably still miss a few upcoming due to training, but I do try to make them when I can. And I appreciate coming in and talking to people. So just a quick update. So around the firehouse, or a quick update for calls, we did have 50 calls for the month of April. It was kind of a slower month, thank goodness. It means the public's being safe. I love that. 12 of those were fires. Another 12 were rescue / emergency medical calls. We did 14 traffic collisions, 1 hazardous condition with no fire, and 2 service calls, followed up by 9 false alarms. We have updated our automated agreement with Brook Trails. As you guys know, we work real close with Brook Trails. Great partnership there. Here recently, we moved to responding to each other's fires, all fires. We would kind of go to all their structure fires, their commercial fires. They'd come to our structures, our commercial fires immediately at the tone out. They did not come down for our wildland fires, small grass fires, things like that. They did not respond. They're going to respond to those from now on. Everything except for what we call a debris fire, so maybe a burn pile that somebody's burning when they shouldn't. So that's going to be a great resource for us. As you know, volunteerism gets tough, and it seems like the further we get out into the new way of the world, volunteerism is something that we struggle with. And with mutual aid agreements and other departments coming in to help our department, us going to help them, it kind of curtails that problem a little bit. It doesn't fix it, but it definitely helps. So we love those auto aid and mutual aid agreements. I do want to update the public. We are moving into our drier season. It's still burned. It's open burning still right now by permit, but we are getting drier. We have had a couple escape control burns, and this is the time of year we have those. So we'd like to just kind of remind everybody, even though it is a burn day, it's dry, it's windy, those fires do get away pretty quickly, and you are responsible. If that fire gets off your property, burns down the neighbor's house, you are responsible for that. So make sure we're burning safely, only on burn days. We will we'll suspend our burning on our local permit May 31st. You'll still see, well, the ag permits, the CAL FIRE permits, the air quality control permits will still be out there until the burn ban comes into effect. We'll still honor those in our district when you have those, but our personal permit, if you got it from us, will expire May 31st. So if you're going to burn beyond May 31st, you'll need to get a different permit. Around the firehouse, I think I started an update last time by letter. We did get a new solar array on top of the main station, which is pretty exciting. I'm not exactly sure why we didn't put that in when we first built it. It could have just been just lack of forecasting that issue, but we do have it up now. We're waiting for PG&E to come and sign off on it so we can turn that grid on and start generating some of our own power. We're kind of excited about that. We do have our annual fundraiser coming up. Our association, they asked me to put out a little blast about that, so June 17th. I did get a little report that tickets are getting hard to find. I'm not sure why. They should be out there. You may receive some at home. 17th is the date. I don't remember, Nanny, you got these at when we're starting that this year?
When we're starting what?
The association fundraiser?
I believe we start at 10.
10 a.m.?
I thought it said noon to 8 on the
Noon to
tickets.
8.
Is it noon to 8? So we got some changes this year. So we do have our second annual cornhole tournament, which is pretty neat. But we're changing the food stuff. We usually do like a hamburger, hot dog kind of thing, bag of chips, Coke. The guys got together and put together a chicken dinner thing. It's I believe it's a $20 plate. The tickets are out there now. Pre-sales are appreciated, so we know kind of what we're going to be feeding. But we'll be selling at the gate too, unless we sell out on pre-sales. Should be a neat deal. Firehouse tours, muster truck rides, ask a firefighter, all the normal stuff that we normally do, and we're looking forward to that. So June 17th, look forward to seeing all you guys there if we can. Training, not a lot of training right now. We did finish up our wildland series with our pack test. That happened last night for the folks who hadn't done it yet. So if you don't know, the pack test is it's a 3-mile walk. You kind of see the federal fire guys, they use the area here, they do that 3-mile walk, 45-pound weight, got to do it in 45 minutes. Our members do the same thing. They finished that up last night. That's kind of a fun thing. A lot of red faces, a lot of out of breath. It's quite a deal for us volunteers who don't get to run every day. So anyways, we took care of that, and we're moving into it and geared up for this year's fire season. With our equipment, some exciting stuff in the equipment. I have been keeping you kind of updated, but the UTV vehicle, our little Polaris UTV, is fully outfitted now. It's up in service. It's in the CAD program with CAL FIRE, so that's ready for response right now. Pretty neat little vehicle. If you haven't seen it, you can always let us know. I'd be happy to take you guys, show it to you. I know it was in the paper not too long ago. A lot of things that we can do with that we can never do before. We really don't even know how much we're going to use it. In the upcoming seasons we'll show all, but definitely a neat piece of equipment that we've never had before. The new Type 6, we're leaving tomorrow to go to Utah to pick up the new Type 6. It's completed finally. We'll be bringing that back hopefully by Friday, starting the outfit process on that. For those of you that are not familiar with Type 6, it's kind of a neat deal for firefighters, because to be a firefighter and drive a fire engine, you got to have some experience, you got to have some time. You got to have a Class A license or at least a firefighter endorsed license through DMV, and it takes time and it takes some experience. But the Type 6 is a pickup. It's a 1-ton pickup with a flatbed, small diesel pump on the back of it. We can train in-house people that can use it. Once they're signed off in-house, the Class C license covers it, and they can go respond immediately. So it's kind of a neat deal to not have to wait for somebody to get all those qualifications to be able to respond to an incident. It will respond out of our substation, and not just fire. It's a fire truck, it's a fire engine, but it'll be our first out for anything that's not a structure fire or a big commercial fire or commercial vehicle fire. It's going to carry our over-the-bank rescue tools, our vehicle extraction equipment, our caps and winch. It'll be ready to roll for almost anything other than big fires. Wildland fires, stuff like that will be first out from the substation, along with our Type 3s. So neat deal. The Type 3 engine that we do have ordered, it's been a real process. It's been on order since January 22. It just keeps pushing further and further. But it looks like if everything goes right, by July 1, it should be.
Is that because of the supply chain stuff?
It's a lot to do with supply chain stuff and logistics of the manufacturers just trying to get it through the line. I was given a 4 to 8 week, well, actually that's a little lie, 6 to 8 week. Once it hit the factory door and rolled out the other side, that was, I think, 14 weeks ago. So they're struggling. Some of the supply chain, some of it's maybe workforce, it's hard to say, but hopefully July 1, it's in-house and it's starting to get outfitted and it's up and running for mid-fire season this year.
How does the zero emissions policy for the state of California?
So we're exempt under some of that. With our older equipment that of course has no emission standard whatsoever, we're exempt on that. Now every new piece we buy, it's fully CARB compliant. It's all DEF and CARB compliant, like anything you would buy. But our older stuff though, we don't have to retrofit our older stuff.
But you're not required to go to electric or anything of that nature?
I won't, as of today, no. Could that happen? Yeah. Are there new hybrid and fully electric fire apparatus? Yeah, they're out there.
They are out?
But we're not being forced to buy them at this point. How long that's going to last, I don't know. I can tell you one thing, you don't want us responding to your emergency and having our battery go dead.
Well, that's what I was thinking, so I was
I'm a little worried
curious.
about that whole scenario. But no, right now we're doing good. And we are forecasting that. I mean, all of our small engines and stuff, as we replace them, most of them are going battery powered. I mean, we're still getting gas powered chainsaws and stuff like that, but a lot of our tools, our extrication tools are all battery powered. So it's kind of leading that way a little bit of time. That's all I got. Hope that was enough. I've been gone a while.
Yeah, that was good. I do have a question from the public. Sure. It's been noted that when there have been these calls, the fire trucks come from the substation.
Sure.
We have this brand new station, so how come they're not coming out of there?
So we're fortunate enough to have 2 stations in our town. A lot of small departments don't have to. They just have the one, so everybody responds. It has its good and its bads. The bads being we can't, as duty officers, we can't forecast where people are going to go and assign equipment. We have to rely on the volunteers to pick what they're going to bring and from the closest station they're at. So that's why it is. If you live on that end of town and we have a nighttime call and you're home, you're going to respond to that station and you're going to pull whatever apparatus out of that station is appropriate for the call. If you're on this end, you're going to come here. We house the big ladder truck here, one of our Type 1s, our Type 3, our big heavy rescue is in this station. The other station, it has a Type 1, has a Type 3. It has a water tender, but it doesn't have a big heavy truck. It'll have the Type 6. So it kind of depends on where you are, when it comes out, and what we need. And our firefighters are trained to a level where we don't really have to tell them what to bring. They kind of know what to bring, just from the call, from what we get from the initial call.
Great.
Makes it nice.
Thank you.
Of the statistics you gave, about what percentage are being responded out of the other, out of here?
I bet you it's close to 50-50. I bet you it could be. A nighttime call, small fire, we'll pull a Type 1 out of both stations, 3 to 5 staffed per unit, if we're lucky. Sometimes 2 staffed, but It's about a 50-50.
Good to have two.
And we look forward, when we get a new application, the first thing I look at is where they live. It kind of tells me where they're going to respond from. And we do fall short on engineers and stuff, captains and stuff. They might be heavy on this end, and captains and engineers, and light on that end. And that can be an issue to get apparatus out.
One more question, Chief.
Sure.
You're still looking for firefighters?
Always. But I mean, we're not doing bad. We have a 40-man roster, not including our Ridgewood Ranch folks that work with us. We're usually 30 to 35 on roster, but out of 35, if you get a dozen who are active responders, they respond a lot.
So if somebody were inclined to want to volunteer, who should they see?
Main station. Come in anytime and talk to Michelle. She's almost there. Talk to me if I'm running around. We'll get you an application. We'll start the process.
All right, thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to have you here and to hear your report in person.
Good. I think I'll be here next month too, I think, unless something changes. Okay, any other questions? All right, appreciate it.
Have a great evening.
Thank you.
All right, we'll move on to item 4, which is the enactment of ordinances. Tonight we'll be reviewing and considering for adoption an ordinance to repeal and replace the current Title VI of Willits Municipal Code entitled Animals with a new title. With a new Title VI entitled Animals incorporating the provisions of Mendocino Code Title 10. Mouthful.
Is this on for the chief's introduction or presentation? Or?
I thought it was for you.
Oh, all right. Well, at our last meeting, we introduced this new ordinance, and tonight it's up for adoption. And the reason for this is we have a contract with the county to provide animal control services here in the city, and they are requiring that our code contain their code, the Mendocino County Code Title 10. And so in reviewing our existing code, it's very old, it's outdated, and there's nothing in it really worth keeping. So we are doing an actual repeal of our existing code, and now a new animal ordinance that simply is an incorporation of the county's code. And should the council pass this ordinance, then we'll be in compliance with our contract and the county can begin providing services for us.
Mayor, I'd like to let you know that in the part where it says that it's the recommended action, it says that you're adopting a resolution. You are not. You're just voting on the ordinance itself.
Okay.
So the recommended action would be to waive the reading of the ordinance and adopt this new replacement ordinance.
Okay. Does anybody from the council have questions or comments about this potential ordinance? No. Okay. Does anybody from the public have any comments they'd like to make about this resolution to update our animal portion of the city municipal code? No.
You still have to buy your licenses from the county.
Yes. All right. Hearing none, I'm going to bring it back up to the dais. I will entertain a motion.
I'd like to so move that we adopt the resolution approving the...
Nope. No resolution.
Oh, sorry, adopt the ordinance. I'm sorry. I read that, yeah. And waive the reading of the ordinance.
Okay.
Second motion?
I think Larry beat you to it.
Oh, did he? Okay.
So we have a motion
He did.
and a second. And Dolores, may we have a roll call?
Councilmember Strong?
Yes.
Rodriguez?
Yes.
Stransky?
Yes.
Gonzalez?
Yes.
Mayor Fleming?
Yes. Thank you very much. All right. Next item is the review and consider adoption of an ordinance to repeal and replace Chapter 8.24 of the Municipal Code regarding licensure of tobacco retailers. This is a similar sort of situation, I think.
Yes, and I'll just take the lead on this one. Once again, this is a ordinance that will, basically, we are mirroring what the county presented for their purposes of enforcement. This has had a long gestation to get to this point, and it was for good reasons. And staff is proud to present this for your consideration, the ordinance to waive the first reading, this reading, and proceed with the adoption of the ordinance.
All right. Any council members have any questions about this new tobacco licensing ordinance?
Got a full discussion.
We did indeed. Anybody from the public would like to weigh in on this? If you could come to the dais and state your name for the record, please. Or not the dais, the podium.
Yeah, it seems kind of silly to walk all the way over here just to say that I'm Lucy Bartholomew. I work for the Blue Zones Project, and I'm one of the leaders on the Mendocino County Tobacco Prevention Coalition. And I just want to say how excited and happy that we are that this tobacco retail license ordinance is being voted on tonight. It has been a long time coming, and we look forward to helping with implementation in any way that we can. And thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, Lucy. Thanks for all your work on this, too. All right. Anybody else from the public like to weigh in? No? Okay, I'll bring it back up and entertain a motion.
I would like to so move to adopt ordinance 2023-03 and repeal and replace chapter 8.24 of that. Second it. City of Willits Municipal Code, chapter 8.2, and waive the reading.
And Larry just seconded.
Thank you.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. May we have a roll call, please?
Councilmember Strong?
Yes.
Rodriguez?
Yes.
Stransky?
Yes.
Gonzalez?
Yes.
Mayor Condon?
Yes. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And thanks for all the persistence of the public advocates who have helped keep this shepherded along.
Indeed. All right, we'll move on to the consent calendar. Items on the consent calendar tonight are city council minutes from the May 10th, 2023 meeting. They are presented for approval or denial. Any comments from the council on the minutes from May 10th?
Done.
None. Any members of the public have comments about our May 10th minutes? Okay,
I will approval of the consent calendar.
thank you, Madge.
I'll second the motion.
Sabrina seconds. May we have a roll call, please?
Councilmember Strong?
Yes.
Rodriguez?
Yes.
Stransky?
Yes.
Gonzalez?
Yes.
Mayor Condon?
Yes, I feel like we're being so efficient tonight. Okay, monthly activity reports. We do have a building activity report for April of 2023 in the packet. These matters do not require action by the council but are of public interest. I encourage you to take a look at those to see the building activity within our fair city. Item 7, commissions, agencies, and authorities. We have none tonight. So we'll move on to the city manager reports and recommendations. Take it away, Brian.
Thank you. Don't have any heavy-duty business items or items that I want to really bring to your attention at this point that demands some action. We had to amend the agenda a little bit. There would have been an action item in 2, but they've been postponed to a later date. So I wanted to take the opportunity to update on 3 items that have been circulating a little bit throughout the community, maybe council members have heard as well. So the first one is the business license administration update. So I'm returning back to where the council instructed staff. This is about 2.5 months ago. Staff presented a revised fee schedule for the council's consideration. The council expressed concerns about the business license fees, both on the intent, the logistics, and the appropriateness of specific fees. And you asked us to take a look at it. We have gone back and looked at them. Unfortunately, Kathy is not available to attend. She's done the background research into it, so I'm just going to summarize her comments that she relayed to me on this item. What we were looking at was potentially redoing the business license component of the fee schedule. We found out that by state statutes, it is a tax. And if you're going to implement a new tax or updated or revised tax, you would have to take that as a ballot measure. The consensus that we heard from 2 consultants, I think maybe 2 or 3 that Kathy reached out to, said you really don't want to do that unless there's a desperate need, unless you have a large distribution or a retail complex coming to your community. You're really no different than the majority of communities that are small to mid-sized that don't have a large tax base that is non-residential or property tax driven. So knowing that, we're just going to work internally, once again, take another look, because we did hear other comments about the fee schedule that was being proposed, and we're going to take a look and make those corrections putting the fee schedule back to the council with the recommendation that the fee schedule component relating to business license fees will remain as is. But we have looked, we are receiving a proposal from Avenue, which basically they're consultants that compiles our quarterly TOT and Bradley Burns sales tax performance. They're going to put together a proposal for us to give them the ability to audit or verify that businesses are true reporting both to the city and to the state. There's some concern, we don't know. We just basically, we want to take that question off the table. If a business is truly reporting back to the city their gross receipts, because they have to do that to the state. So we just want to basically tie, what Avenue would do is have a software linkage to the reporting mechanism at the state, and then verify what they report back to the city on their business license. That's what we have on that. So, moving forward to that. Item 2, East Commercial Street Corridor Public Forum. Some council members were present. I know I've discussed this project with individual members of the staff. We took down our boards. They were up for a couple of days. If there's any questions or follow-up, let me know. The public forum was well intended. We received a lot of good input from entities and groups. Maybe not pure numbers of individuals, but we had participants that were representing groups, entities, and larger concerns. So we were able to amass a good amount of comments. I had a debrief session with the consultants yesterday, and the goal is to present a finalized document for your consideration and adoption at the June 28th meeting, with the intent of kickstarting phase 2, which would take the conceptual items identified and illustrated in the plan and move them forward to a more formalized content with a recommendation schedule with potential funding. And I want to throw this out here as well, as one of the items I've heard from the council, and I want to make this clear as we do transition from practices of previous administrations. When this planning item comes to the council, part of the resolution is going to have a recital that basically puts a benchmark in there that staff is obligated to return to the council within either quarterly or some defined time basis, updates on what we're doing to implement specific items in the plan.
Excellent.
So that's what we're going to do, and we're going to move that with other plans as they come forward. So, we do a lot of planning work. We want to make sure that we're getting those results. We want to see the results being implemented and moving the community forward. So that's that. The third item is the gym. This is an item that we have talked about with Mark Beebe, the school superintendent. The gym is one of these arrangements that the city has entered into decades ago, and it still perpetuates. Simple fact, the city built the gym back in 1983.
And when you say gym, you're talking about which gym? Right,
Yes.
for the record.
Becknell Grove Gym. I think that's Grove Gym. The middle school gym, right? We have no connection to the gym other than legal description of fee simple property. User groups utilize the facility. They rent it for various events. They never verify or ask, we don't rent it out, we don't lease it out, we don't do the schedule for the gym. At the end of the day, we maintain insurance on that through our REMIF facility coverage. So we would have some savings if we do the transfer. To Mark's credit, he's asking the right questions for due diligence. He's asking about any property inspections, blueprints, if there's underground storage tanks at that facility. And Dolores here was doing the yeoman work of trying to go back through old microfiche records from the state building officials. We did come across state building or blueprints that the state approved for that facility, dating back to 82, 83 timeframe.
Actually, the blueprints were with the state. I had to call.
Yeah, from the architect. We tracked down a name, and the architect was still had a practice. Eureka.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're going to pass all that to Mark, and hopefully that satisfies his concerns. and we can, facilitate the transfer. We had a discussion with Jim in our staff meeting about, if there's a potential gift of public property of public funds, we could make sure that the transfer still encourages and utilizes that facility for the intended purpose of school education programs and for the community at large.
A question, when we built it, I'm going to assume that we leveraged some sort of grant, and I know that this has come up in the past. Is there any requirement or sunset clause that...
We can't find anything. It doesn't look like there was a lot of grants. There was the police association or the...
Willits Police Officers Association was utilizing it, as well as the Sheriff's Activities League, and that no longer happens.
Because, yeah, I mean, I'm assuming we got involved because it was kind of like the pool that we
don't know.
We basically built it with the, basically they couldn't build it. We had the ability to get funding, and I think that's why we got involved. It's kind of like the pool. We leveraged state.
I don't, what, in talking to Mark and looking at some of those other facilities, you mentioned the pool, the tennis courts, it looked like the city had greater latitude to either pursue funding or they were just in a better position to manage a project of that nature. I don't know if that's what some of the correspondence, there's no indication, as you described, that there is a provision, there's a stipulation that we have to hold title to it for perpetuity. So, and just to run through that again, the school district is interested. Like I said, they just want to make sure that there's no hidden items or unseen concerns that would need to be addressed in a subsequent transfer.
I think the only thing is at one point it was listed in our emergency plan as a evacuation center, and I'm not sure if that's still the case or not.
Don't know.
It really didn't meet the good requirements because it didn't really at the time have showers or anything like that, and that I think the last couple of emergencies we sent everybody up to the high school because they could feed people and bathe up there where they couldn't do it there. And I think it was more relevant when the hospital was right next door.
Yes. So, I mean, we could look into it, if it's being used or delineated as an evacuation site or a staging area, but, it's just looking at, we've been going through looking at some of these arrangements and properties that we have, and that was one of the ones that we can easily sever the ties without too much heartache.
Any comments from council?
I had shared with City Manager Bender that it's very much used by the community, particularly lots of nonprofits in the community. And since taxpayers did pitch in at the city level, I would just like to see some kind of contingency written into the transfer that indicates that we would like to see that the school district still offers up the building for use to the general public beyond just school educational uses. I imagine that's always going to be their intent, but it might be nice to see something written into it.
I think, and maybe Jim would know, but I think the Field Act covers that, and that's what basically opens up school property to the public when it's not being used. That's what allows you to go use the school fields or the theater up there. Obviously, the school gets first priority, but after that, there's a process where I believe I'm not sure if it's education.
Is that like a
code.
state or an education policy?
Yeah, I think it's some sort it's called the Field Act, which
So
requires...
if it's already protected under an act like that, then it's not important.
I think it's a very good point that you're making, and it needs to be available for the public. And on this gift of public funds issue, there is what's known as the public purpose exception. And so while cities should not be giving away valuable assets, if it's in the best interest of the public then it's protected and it's not a violation if there's a public purpose that's served by it. And so here, if this transaction documents the fact that the school district is going to continue to make this available for the public, I think we're going to be fine.
And it's a transfer from one public entity to another, and we can ensure that the use will continue as it's being utilized by the groups and the community. We have reassurance from Mark Beebe that will continue. It was funny because when we were talking to Mark, and he's like, you know, those groups come and they said, oh yeah, we checked with the city, you're good. And we're like, no one checks with us. He's like, well, I was told. So, you know, those are little things we need to tighten up as well, because if the worst case scenario happened, you know, there's not a clear ownership for liability, risk management, risk reduction. And that's one of the big reasons why. We just want to clean up our list of facilities. REMIF has asked us for that. We know REMIF is increasing their liability insurance coverage for their clients. If we can do the best we can to eliminate these outliers, it's in our best interest.
I like the idea, I just want to be careful.
No.
I just
We
want to be
understand.
careful that we're not doing it on a leadership agreement, but rather like written into.
Oh, yes. Yes.
Physically written into the agreement, or it's already protected by the statute.
So like I said, it's fee simple property, so it's legally described. So if we do the transfer, and this goes through, there will be provisions that we can make sure that the transfer is contingent on. And that could be the number one.
Sounds good.
I think that one of the things that has become so apparent in the last couple of years is the city has a legacy of many projects and agreements that aren't fully documented and codified. And we have all experienced trying to untangle that knot and get the city out of these less than clear-cut situations. And that is one of the things I really admire about Brian as our city manager, is that he's making sure that as we go forward, our new agreements are clear and not muddy. So I'm hopeful that you will continue on that path.
Trying.
Oh, it's not the Field Act. It looks like there is state law that covers that.
Madge.
Did you find something?
Yeah.
A quick comment about the item, the first item, which was the business license. I had a really good conversation with Kathy about, you know, they had looked into, I had actually looked into several other jurisdictions, ways of defining what business licenses were and which kinds of businesses had which rates, and whether it was based on square footage or gross receipts or number of employees and all, you know, there's actually a lot of different ways it's done in different jurisdictions. And I have been raising the concern that the gradation of how much business licenses were being charged seemed to hit the smaller businesses slightly higher percentage than the really large businesses. But anyway, after the conversation with Kathy, having done more research, and the fact that, in fact, we can't change it without going to a vote of the public on some entirely new, you know, revised rate structure because it's considered a tax. And I said, it's not going to make much of a difference at all, but what might make a difference is what you were pointing out, Brian, is the, are we getting accurate reporting on those gross receipts so that we might actually be due a little bit more business license fees than what we're getting because of that, but we're not, you know, we're actually charging a very small amount for business.
We're less than Fort Bragg, which are, you know, within the county, that's probably our closest size comparison in the business environment that we both support. So it's not perfect. The intent of the business license fees is not to inhibit or put at risk business owners in the community. It's a processing fee. It's a fee that, you know, every community charges for various reasons. It's fair. Is it perfect? No. Is it? Can we get it to work and we can have that outside external audit being done? Yes, that will, you know, go a long way in addressing some of the concerns we have.
Larry.
As I remember, it gets you in a category and that as a business license. Is that not true?
Yes.
Correct,
Yes.
that is true.
And, you know, and you just pay a fee for whatever slot you fit into.
Based on your revenue,
Yeah,
yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
Anything else about that first item?
No, just I want to point out, when you do the reconciliation, if you're going based on sales tax, you can go to the franchise tax board, get that from the state. But when you're talking about service-based businesses, I'm just wondering if you're using a different way to contact the state, because service-based businesses don't report sales tax quarterly like that, like we do with
That's true.
I understand what you're saying. I wasn't involved in the discussion with
just
Avenue.
curious
But this is a service they provide throughout the state to other clients. It makes sense what I saw in the proposal that they submitted for consideration. I didn't see that specific detail.
What's the cost related to doing this type of an audit? I was curious.
Didn't see that either. We haven't got the final numbers yet.
So I'm just wondering if based on how much it'll cost, whether it's worth the value.
That's a very good point. We haven't seen the final.
Are we concerned this is really prevalent in our community?
Yeah, we haven't seen the final results yet, or the final, the proposal yet with the numbers. They basically structured on what they anticipate would be the gross activity within a community, the size of the population. That's basically their formula for putting together a proposal.
Okay.
Yeah, we haven't received it yet. They were a little delinquent, and then Kathy followed up with them, and they said, "Oh yeah, we forgot. Okay, we'll get with you." Our contact there, Tom Adams, he was out of the office for some time, and he was also delayed in doing our fourth quarter assessment of DOT and Bradley Burns.
I wanted to make a comment about part 2, the East Commercial Corridor. I wanted to say I really appreciated your comments about having benchmarks worked into the planning document. I think sometimes in the past, there's a perception from the public that the city focuses so much on planning as if the plan is the goal instead of the implementation. And so I'm really grateful to hear that implementation will be baked in, and we will have a way to show the public what we're actually accomplishing and producing for them. So thank you for that.
No, thank you. That's one of the reasons why we came to the council for that senior planner position, to fortify our ability in community development to take the good plans and the good work that we have done and what we're about to do and make them happen.
Great. Anything else from you, Brian?
No, that's it. That's it for tonight.
Okay. All right, we'll move on to item 9. This is an action item. We'll hear a presentation by Bartle Wells Associates regarding the 2023 Water and Wastewater Rate Study. This will include discussion and possible authorization from council to mail California Prop 218 notices to property owners of proposed rate adjustments.
And it is a PowerPoint, so. Just before, for the council's benefit, I don't know if we're looking to implement and install large screens on these 2 walls and potentially in the back, so you, as council members, can view. We do it, the images will be simultaneous, and then also the members of the public. So just bear with us. It'll be comparable to the panel that's behind you. We looked at different options, and we think that would be the best fit.
Great. Hello, Manny.
I'm Manuel Orozco, Finance Director. I'm here to introduce Eric Helgeson. I did butcher it, yay! To do the draft water and wastewater rate study. Basically, this item before you is to ask for permission in order to be able to, well, first to get direction on exactly what scenario we would want to have chosen, and that's something that Eric will take care of in terms of explaining what's going on. And the next step is to be able to send out 218 notices. So without further ado.
Thank you. As Manny said, my name is Eric Helgeson. I'm with Bartle Wells Associates, and we performed the water and wastewater rate studies so far, and as was said, the goal for the presentation today is to receive input on especially the wastewater. We developed 2 scenarios, which scenario to move forward with, and hopefully receive authorization to send out the 218 notices. Part of the timeline and kind of the coming at a kind of abbreviated form of study coming to you when we are is to be able to get the wastewater rates onto the tax roll by the county's deadline within and still meet the requirements of the Prop 218 notice period, which is sending out notices 45 days in advance of a public hearing. And so with that, I'll get into the presentation. I'm going to quickly go through the rate study process, talk about our objectives, and then dive into the water and wastewater financial plans, and then go over the next steps. The study process at a very high level is just to develop long-term financial plans that take into account the projected operating costs, debt service, and capital needs, and develop and identify what rate revenues are necessary to make all of that happen. We then go through all of the costs and what drive the costs of the different enterprises, and use that to allocate that revenue requirement to the different rate classes and rate tiers so that it conforms to the proportionality requirements of Prop 218. We worked closely with city staff throughout this project. I can't thank Andrea, Manny, Scott, and Dolores enough for all their help. And our goal is to present rates that taking all of the recommendations and objectives of the city. This is just a high-level overview of the process from gathering data to where we are now at the cusp of the Prop 218 process. The objectives of the study are one, to make sure that the rates are sufficient to fund the capital and operating needs that have been identified. The rates need to comply with Prop 218. And also, we want to maintain a customer focus. Part of that is to make sure that the rates can gradually and predictably get from point A to point B. When we develop the long-term financial plans, we're identifying where the finances need to be, not just next year, but in 5 years and then in 10 years. And we want to get there in a way that's gradual and predictable for customers. A little bit more on Prop 218. The substantive requirements require that rates cannot exceed the cost of service, meaning the rates are paying for the service that's being provided. All of the utilities are independent enterprises, meaning that they're majority funded by rate revenue, and rely on those rates to continue operating. But the rates fund the service, they don't exceed it. The other substantive requirement is that rates are proportional to the cost of service, which is why we go through the cost allocation process. Finally, there's a procedural requirement, which is where we're at right now, which states that in order to increase rates, notices must go out with the maximum rates that the council can choose to adopt at least 45 days prior to holding a public hearing. During that time, the public can submit protests, and if the majority of the customers or property owners submit protests, then those notice rates cannot go forward. And finally, the council must hold a public hearing where the protests are tallied, and the public has a chance to provide input.
Could you just clarify that?
Yes.
After that 45-day period, the council could choose to adopt lower rates than what they noticed? But
Correct. The notice rates are the maximum rates of the council. It's going through the process allows the council the opportunity to adopt up to those rates. And I will put a caveat that it is important that the rates that are adopted still conform to the proportionality requirements. So part of our study is we allocate costs between the classes. So to adopt rates that still conform, if they're not up to the maximum, still conform to the proportional relationship between the customer classes and the tiers. So diving into the water enterprise, the water enterprise provides over 6,000 people in a 5-mile area, high-quality potable water. In order to do that, it requires a lot of infrastructure, over 30 miles of pipes, 4 storage tanks, 5 pump stations. To keep all that up, maintained, since the last rate study, the city's completed over 13 projects worth about $5 million. The main focus of this is one of the main focuses of the last 5 years was to eliminate the steel water mains and continue replacing that with newer pipe. The average age of those mains is about 60 years old, so it's going a long way to continue to improve water quality. And there's improving fire flow capacity is a continued theme, as well as bringing in the redundant secondary groundwater source. Over the next 5 years, those 3 priorities are going to continue to be part of the capital plan. On the fire flow part of that priority, improving the storage capacity in the tanks is a big part of the 5 and 10-year plan, as well as completing the groundwater project to have a redundant secondary source in case of drought and other things, and obviously maintaining and continuing to improve water quality by finishing the replacement of the older pipes, as well as adding in an annual distribution system flushing component as well. So to fund the next capital plan, we're looking at about $6.8 million over 5 years. Over the 10-year period, it looks like about $9 million. This just shows that there are a lot of projects identified in the next year, and another spike near the end of the 5-year period, which are really the storage projects which are driving that. And then looking beyond that, just to get to a point where you can continually cash fund a consistent amount of repair and replacement, which I'll get into a little bit later. The main drivers, as I said, are capital, operating cost inflation. Since the last rate increase, which was adopted in 2019, there's been over 18% inflation. We're projecting 5% per year. We're trying to be conservative but realistic with that projection. And also, part of the other drivers are, but the capital, you're going to need to debt finance a certain component. I believe it's about a little over $4 million of the capital plan that we have, but our long-term financial plan is to get you to a point where you're able to cash fund, in today's dollars, $500,000 a year to avoid needing to need debt financing after you get through this chunk of projects. So the 5-year financial plan, which is what this graph shows, is we identified that you need 6.5% rate increases per year. That's about 1.5% over our projected inflation to be able to maintain the funding requirements, and then get to a point where your revenues are sufficient to fund your debt service, your operating costs, and your cash funded capital target. This graph is a visualization of your cash flow. The columns are your total expenses, the green line is your revenue, and the black line is your reserve. So you have some reserves due to COVID. You haven't been, and staffing shortages. You've built up some because some of the projects have been delayed. So our capital plan is utilizing those reserves. Our financial plan is utilizing those reserves, and then once your reserves are at a prudent level, maintaining that prudent amount of reserves and using debt to finance the remainder of the projects. At a 10-year picture, your financial plan just is looking to keep revenues in line with your expenses. Some are just a little higher, some are just a little lower, but keep your revenues in line with expenses and maintain your reserves, and just keep the increases gradual and predictable over time. So the outcome is of the rate recommendation is for the next year for your base charge to go from $25.42 to $27.08, and for your residential it'll go from $6.28 for the tier 1 to $6.63, and then $8.69 to $9.96 for the tier 2. With our cost of service, performing the cost of service study and looking at your current allocation of costs, it did push a little more cost into the tier 2 than was before, and we're just, and as I said before, the reason we do that is to keep your rates in proportional keep in compliance with that requirement of Proposition 218. So the impact to customers with those proposed rates are a little bit, there's a slightly lower impact for customers using within Tier 1, and then a slightly higher impact for customers within whose usage goes into Tier 2. And this will occur in the first year, and then after the first year, rates will continue to just increase based on the overall revenue increase after that cost of service adjustment takes place. The impact of the proposed rate increases compared to the rates in your neighboring agencies will keep you in about the same position. We perform these surveys to give you a general idea of where you stand. Every system is different, every average use is different, so it's being in the middle is a very reasonable place to be. And what this shows is that this change will basically maintain your position relative to your neighbors.
Just have a question about that. In many of those jurisdictions, the fixed rate is a higher percentage of the total.
Mm-hmm.
Is there an advantage or a disadvantage to that?
It's and that's one thing we weigh when we look at the objectives of the rate study. Having a higher fixed charge makes the water a little bit less affordable to your lower use customers, and it does make your revenues a little more predictable. With your reserve levels where they were, we felt it was prudent to essentially maintain the fixed variable split where it was.
I have a question about the chart. So this would be where we would be in year 1, but what would this look like in year 5? Would we be spiked significant higher, or would we still be in the middle?
It's very tough to say. Generally, you probably stay about the same because most cities have been doing studies with inflation. Sometimes cities delay and then you fall behind it, but it is really hard to say because most agencies are going to engage in this exercise.
But do you find that these other cities, Santa Rosa, Rohnert Park, Fort Bragg, Hillsburg, Cloverdale, all in that area right there, do they already have plans in the works for 6.5%, for example, or are they being more conservative and staying at a lower percentage?
I can't answer that directly. I will say you're about where you were when we did this 6 years ago, so it stayed about the same. I think most cities are experiencing a similar inflation, so I'd assume that unless they have major capital infrastructure that needs to be done, you'd probably stay, their expenses would probably keep moving along, and in this case we're recommending essentially inflationary increases. So unless they have a large project that makes them jump above you, or unless they delay rate increases, which does happen, then all of a sudden you'll see a 30% increase in the jump from one side to the other. But if they continue doing what we're proposing, if their rate consultants recommend that they do what we recommend, you'd probably stay, and the alignment would stay similar.
Go ahead.
We have a number of people in our community that do not live in the city of Willits, but yet they're a customer on our water system. I don't know how many other cities are the same way. Is there any kind of a thing that we would, and I'm not saying that we should do this, but I'm just saying there should be a different charge, a surcharge or whatever for the people that do not live in the city, because we do not get anything from that. I mean, they're in the county and they pay county taxes on all these things, and nothing to do with the price that we have paid, for the water system that we have now, which is underground and all this kind of stuff. do other cities do these kinds of things? Or do you,
It's, with Prop 218, it's been, it's much more difficult to do that, and it does up in the city. You have to prove that essentially prove that there is a higher cost of providing service to those customers. And the burden of proof tends to be on the city to do that. I believe you have the connection fee that charges customers who connect, and then your rates are charging them for the service. And by having more customers, it does have somewhat of a benefit by a larger rate base, to divide your larger number of customers to divide your revenue requirement by, which helps defray some of the costs, so you hold a slightly larger economy of scale. But just to directly answer your question, cities have been moving away from doing that because of Prop 218.
but we are going to go through, can I put on my hat so that I...
Oh, please. Yeah, no, that's right.
Is we're going to go through a thing in the next few years about different groups of people that want to use our water, and they're not in the city. And so we as a city have to say to them, well, you're not in the city, so we're going to have a surcharge on you, or, I mean, there's got to be something where we have jumped through different hoops to get what we have. We have the surface water and we have the well water now, and these people are just coming on, at the same rate that we're paying, and we're paying the city waters. Am I saying this correctly, or maybe not?
I think what I'm hearing is that outside city customers are buying in, they're benefiting from everything customers have done, and wanting to make sure that they are fairly paying into the system. I would say that the connection charge or capacity charge that new connections pay to the city, we should make sure that is fairly recovering that portion of benefit that they're going to receive. I guess, again, if we're going to have a differentiation between the connection charge, if there's a different charge for a new connection within the city versus a new connection outside of the city, we would have to be very careful to make sure that basically identify every cost that is specific only to outside city customers connecting in, if we're going to implement a different charge between those two. But having any new customer pay to connect into the city's infrastructure that hasn't previously been connected is a way that is a way the city does maintain that equitability between existing customers and new customers.
Madam Mayor, maybe this will help Member Stransky's comments. I will be tactful in this as I proceed tactfully through this. The city has gotten ourselves in somewhat of a bind. We have extended services outside our jurisdiction without either areas of service agreements or incorporating them into a sphere of influences for our general plan, and we are updating their general plan. So this is an opportunity for us to look at these areas where we extended lines for services, put them into designated service areas, sphere of influence, and then that opens up the process, working with LAFCO, to create service districts, which would be, we can do operation plans where rates could be different because they're a separate district. They're a separate operating unit. We may not incorporate them, but they are benefiting from municipal services at a different, we could place them on a different fee schedule. So that, I think, is our best approach, instead of doing it through a straightforward fee schedule associated with the rates.
Okay, and is that correct? I mean, is that something that we ought to consider as a city?
weigh in on, I think the city manager's
Yes.
a lot more work.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, okay, that's
Yeah.
all I need to know, thank you. I'm sorry to throw this out.
Oh, no, it's totally fine.
It's on stage.
So I guess I wanted to kind of clarify for the folks maybe watching in TV land or folks that don't know that on the Tier 1 rate, it won't be as a big a hit as a Tier 2 rate. And I guess the example I would give, we have a lot of folks that are elderly and maybe it's man and a woman only versus a big household using a lot more water that maybe jumps into Tier 2. And so it's not going to be as big a hit for somebody that's not a big water user. Is that correct?
Correct. It's a slight, it's not a large difference, but it will be a less of a hit to 0 to 6 versus greater than 6, correct.
And then another point of clarification for those out there in the public that don't know that we got the water system thrust on us as a city, that we did not, a lot of these people out in the county weren't our customers per se. We ended up getting them because the city took over an existing water system. And so for those folks out there, the TV land that don't know that it's a service that the city, it was a private water company run by a guy named Horn, I believe, and prior to him it was PG&E that ran it. That's why folks have water out in the county that normally would have to go through an agreement with the city to eventually be brought into the city. So there are a lot of people out there that have water service pre-existing, and that's why, whereas I think what City Manager's talking about is anybody new coming on board would be subject to some of these other folks.
Well, there's still some older ones too.
Oh, really?
They didn't fit nicely into that category.
Okay.
It's a haphazard approach.
So,
Along those lines, if somewhere down the road we get requests from not the existing served areas outside the city limits, but for example, Pine Mountain or Brook Trails or whatever, to, in the event that they were to apply to use city water, maybe just an emergency situation or maybe on an ongoing, would we be able to create different rate structures depending on the cost, not only the cost of serving those areas that are farther away, but also on the basis of all of the historic capital improvements in our system. I'm just...
Okay, let me just jump in here quickly. If it was an emergency situation, there are provisions that would circumvent fees and LAFCO oversight for providing services outside your community. And then fees would be, you're not doing it for fee structure or trying to recoup your fees. You're trying to help health, safety, and welfare situation. If it's not directly associated with emergency relief and you tie fees to it, LAFCO is going to be very upset. They're not going to like it. Because then you're extending your services without, you're circumventing the LAFCO review process for a sphere of influence and annexation.
Okay, good.
Yeah, the only thing I would add from our end, Jim, correct me if I'm wrong, but between governments, you have to, there's Prop 26, which has the cost cannot exceed the cost of service, and then when you get into providing to property owners, Prop 218 has that additional proportionality requirement, which says that rates have to be proportional to the cost of service provided, so that it's just a constraint that you have to work under with looking at different classes and charges. So moving on to the wastewater enterprise. Wastewater provides collection and treatment to over 8,000 people, which includes the Brook Trails Township. Within the collection area, there's 22 miles of sewer main, over 1,900 connections, sewer laterals, and you have the treatment plant, which provides treatment to City of Willits and also takes in the waste from Brook Trails as well. Since the last study, there have been over 11 projects worth over $1 million completed. Most of those projects were focused on the collection system. Going forward, projecting about 2.9 million in capital spending. And with one scenario, which is what we're going to be presenting, scenario 1, rates without doing a solar project, and scenario 2, rates that we think would likely support a solar project, with the caveat that the solar project is in a very early stage. The permit has been submitted so that, or I might be saying it wrong because I'm not an engineer, but there was a permit that had to be submitted in time to qualify under the existing more favorable rates, and so that has been submitted, so there's a timeline associated with that to complete a project. The staff is currently reviewing the options, and so we looked at a preliminary option with a solar project and an option without. To just cut straight to the chase, it's a slight difference between rates. It's front-loading the rate increases slightly to support the solar project versus having it be more even over the 5-year period if you didn't have the solar project. One other difference is you can cash fund your current, without the solar project, you can cash fund all of your capital. With the solar project, you would need to debt fund a large portion of that. This is going into scenario 1 with no project, fairly even capital spending, and then going into a targeted annual cash funded capital in the 5 to 10 year range. That's $400,000 in today's dollars, and you'll see that in the capital in the financial plan. The other drivers, which we touched on before, inflation and maintaining the prudent reserve level. Without the solar project, similar to water, we're looking at, because you do have capital projects you need to accomplish, rate increases that are just slightly over our projected inflation amount of 5%, so 6.5% per year. Again, you had some reserves built. You had reserves built up from the COVID period, where some projects were delayed. So our plan is fully utilizing reserves down to a prudent level, which we recommend about a year of operating expenses in reserve in case of emergency, and also to help secure more favorable financing and other things. The capital plan over 10 years is just looking to stabilize your reserves and maintain revenues just at or slightly above your expenses depending on the year, or slightly below your expenses depending on the year, and be able to cash fund a certain amount of repair and replacement every year, just as the water, so that you don't need to go out for financing for regular predictable repair and replacement work.
Are
Yes.
those, the capital costs out into the 10-year period, are those not, we don't have that far out in the capital improvement budget? So those are just assuming that there will be...
Correct, and you have you have this standing infrastructure, providing, you have pipelines connected to every home, and so we know that there needs to be continual maintenance and repair and replacement of this infrastructure. So we looked at past spending, and it looks like for water you need about $500,000 in today's dollars, and in wastewater you need about $400,000 in today's dollars. But it is a projection, and it will fluctuate, but we design rates to based on kind of an average year. And so without the solar project, the rate increases are roughly 6.5%. There's a little bit of a difference in the first year, as I mentioned, with the cost of service realignment, but your residential and non-residential rates are going up roughly 6.5%, and then we'll go up 6.5% in this scenario thereafter. The next scenario with the solar project, which we have in 25-26, which with the early projections about $3.5 million, that would require a financing for at least $2 million of it. You can see that in this plan. You're going to rate fund a portion, and then your debt service will increase down the road. However, With the early projection we were looking at was potentially reducing your electricity payment in the near term by roughly what the debt service payment would be, so about $230,000. And so in the short to medium term, you save a little bit of money, and then in the longer term, and also if the electricity rates keep going up, you likely save more. But I'm not a solar specialist, so in this rate study period, it was about a wash in the model we created. The main difference is front loading years. So instead of 6.5% increases, it'd be 7% increases for the first 3 years, and then you could, once you can support the debt service, dropping down the further increases to about 6% per year. You end up in about the same place in total rate revenue, and this shows that how it would affect you over the 10-year period. Your operating expenses, which is the gray portion of the column, go down a little bit. The debt service would go up a little bit. It's about a wash in this model. There's a slight difference in the rates, largely just because of allocating the costs specific to the solar. Solar's going to offset a lot of treatment costs. So that was allocated to the strength component, so there's a little bit more of the cost shifted to the non-residential than the non-residential strength components than the residential. So it was more allocated to the strength of the discharge as to the total flow of the discharge. How do these scenarios impact you relative to your neighbors? Just barely jump over brook trails, and then you have each scenario is very similar, just a slight difference for a residential user between scenario 1 and scenario 2. Basically, most of your neighbors are in a very similar, relatively similar rates for their residential customers. So there's not much to be gleaned other than that you're maintaining and you're being prudent and able to proactively maintain your system and have the funds to do that while maintaining a prudent reserve. Combined, between your average, for your average residential user, the combined impact of the water and sewer increases, you jumped slightly past Santa Rosa and Ukiah. But again, most cities have post-pandemic this year, are either going for increases this year or next year with what inflation has been. So, take it with a grain of salt as well. Yes?
Quick question. So you proposed 2 scenarios, one with solar, one without, and we've applied for the solar program. And
That's 2.0.
so along the way, if we get that, then obviously I guess, are we running with both options and setting the rates as if we were going to get solar? And then along the way, for some reason, we don't end up qualifying or something glitches, do we have the option not to go up as high on those rates? Is that, or do we still continue with?
You always have the option to not go up as high. I do recommend, maybe the third year to, do a quick review of where you stand. See, sometimes you get more grants than you expect. Inflation may be lower, although who knows with inflation these days. But things could change more favorably. We try to be slightly conservative, so it is good to kind of review where you stand after the third year. As far as solar versus not, you're basically ending up in the same place in both plans. It's just the solar shifts, front loads it a little bit. Yeah. So if everything comes out as we projected, you still in year 5 want to end up in the same place. But for both plans, I would recommend.
I guess the question I had was, instead of, if we don't need to front load it because of circumstances, then we would continue on an incremental rise, but not as much of a rise initially. But ultimately, it sounds like in order to keep up and pay our bills, we still have to factor in some increases.
Correct. If you found out this year that you didn't need to do it, you could recalculate, but, you know, if it's year 3, then I already have a reduced amount for the final 2 years built in.
Okay.
So,
Thank you, sir.
no problem. And so, you know, basically just to summarize, the city's done a great job of you know, providing financial stewardship with, you know, gradual, continual rate increases as needed. The increases are needed to support the identified capital needs that staff has identified, and just to keep up with the operational funding costs that continue to rise, power, staffing, goods and services, you know, everything has continued to rise more than at a rate that we haven't been used to, frankly. The increases are, the goal is to be incremental over the 5 years to get from where we are now to where we need to be in 5 years, and they're updated to reflect the cost of providing service to each customer class and tier. And the next steps in order to achieve the deadline of getting to the tax roll, or we're having the meeting today, if the council does authorize sending out 218 notices, to send out notices by June 2nd, in order to come back and have a public hearing at the final council meeting in July, which is, I believe is July 22nd, July 26th, and then rates would go into effect August 1st of this year, and then for the next 4 years it'd be going into effect July 1. So that concludes my presentation. I'm open for additional questions.
Another quick question. If we do that and make these deadlines, would we, in order, past year 5, we would go through this whole process again?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes. All right. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
That is?
Yeah. Don't walk towards the light.
Move this side.
Council, comments? Jerry?
Me and Larry got this presentation, or I think I'll call it, I'm not going to say light, we got the same presentation the other day, and I think the comment we had is that nobody wants to raise rates. I mean, I look at what we're paying at the grocery stores, et cetera, and I think when I and Councilmember Rodriguez got on, the first thing we had to do is deal with the rate increase, and it's not fun sitting up here raising rates. But at the same time, I'll be honest with you, while it was nice not paying those rates leading up to when we raised them, you could be everybody's friend and not raise the rates, but when you have to come in and raise them 30% as opposed to 6%, you sure hear about it. And I think I'd rather know that my car insurance has gone up 5% or whatever than to get that huge whatever. And in life, I look at that, and I kind of wanted to quantify that I'd rather give people a measured expectation, and then kind of like what we talked about in our meeting, and I think you hit on it. During COVID, there were some projects we couldn't do, and therefore we wanted to respond to the ratepayers as a council and not raise the rates then, because we didn't have those projects. Now, we could have raised those rates, but we felt at the time, given the situation, that we at least wanted to give the public a little break, but knowing that we would have to do one of these hearings in the future and might have to, and obviously none of us expected inflation. So I guess that's what I wanted to kind of put out. Nobody wants to raise rates, but doing it measuredly is, to me, more responsible. And because to me it's a lack of courage on the governing board when if you kick the can down 5 years and let the next group do it, they're going to have to raise them quite a bit.
You're going to have to go with a bigger can.
Yeah. So that's what I wanted to say.
And just to piggyback on that, I mean, the reality is that each of us will have to pay these increased rates as well. So, we're sort of damned if we do and damned if we don't. But ultimately, being fiscally prudent and taking care of our system means anticipating increased costs and paying for it.
We've done it as a council both ways, and it's really easier if you just do small rate increases at a time before you come up with it, like I said, you have to kick a big can down. We've been through that also, and that's not fun at all. And it's not fun to the people, so I've gone with just small pieces at a time is the way to do it.
It's like putting a Christmas fund together.
That's right. Yeah.
I was going to comment that even people on fixed incomes, which a lot of us are, the Social Security, it has gone up because of the rate of inflation, so we have to too. Everybody has to try to cover their costs, and inflation is affecting the costs. But it's also, to some extent, affecting people's income and ability to pay those costs. So, we're certainly, it's hard to raise rates, and it's hard, on our customers, but we have to be responsible. I just want to also put in, if maybe Andrea has a comment too, but in the long run, I think solarizing is going to pay more than for itself. It does involve a hit at the beginning, because if we have to borrow money to do the project. So I think your approach to having a couple of years of very slightly higher rate increase in order to do that makes sense. But I think when we get to year 10 and 20, and we're finding that with our water project, that having bought the solar project up there is really, in the long run, very beneficial economically, and of course it's also beneficial in avoiding as much greenhouse gas emissions. So I hope we choose that option. And maybe, Andrea, if you have anything to add to that.
Yeah, actually, I did want to speak about that. So one of the most surprising things about the study was actually looking at the sewer treatment plant's increased electrical costs over the last couple of years. I believe they've increased about 50% over the last couple of, 2 years. And the prediction is that PG&E is going to raise rates up to 40% by fall. So we're looking at really skyrocketing costs when it comes to electrical. And if we can invest in solar, we can set up the financing so it's going to be a predictable cost. And we won't be subject to the whims of PG&E or unpredictable escalating costs. So I think that will pay off in the long run. And then when we look at the water treatment plant, we recently did an analysis to confirm the savings, and I'd like to bring that forward at a future council meeting. But we're looking at a savings of about $130,000 a year from that investment. And of course, we're paying off the investment over a 5-year term. But when we look at that and our current cost for PG&E, because there is non-bypassable charges, is about $40,000 a year. So we're looking at a much more stable, predictable cost there. And I think that's helping to benefit the rates for the rate increases for water. Because if we were looking at a similar escalation with electrical, it probably would be reflected in the rates for water.
So I have a follow-up question, because I'm really concerned about, in that expense of solar in that 25, 26 year. And I thought I just heard you say that we would be saving about the difference of about $90,000 per year in electrical costs. But the solar arrays are going to cost us $2 million.
Yeah, and
how long will it take to recoup that $90,000? We're talking about 20 plus years, right?
I'm not following the 90,000.
I heard you say that we're paying, if I heard you correctly, I heard that we were paying about $130,000 for the cost of the electricity, and then $40,000 once we have solar in the than that base rate that they charge, the line charge.
Yeah,
essentially.
so we're actually saving 130 of what we would have been paying to PG&E otherwise.
Right.
And so just that the cost savings is a substantial one for looking at the payback over the 5-year period. And then just stabilizing that cost is really the big factor. And as Eric said, the solar proposal is in its infancy. We have received a financial analysis, and there's a lot of different ways we can go. There are a number of programs, and we could set up financing in a number of ways. So it may not be as big of a hit on that year that we're showing the $2 million. But setting the rates at their current, the recommendation will allow us to cash pay, and I believe, Eric, if you can speak to this, I think we were talking about setting up some like initial payment towards that to lower the debt over time.
Yeah, so for both enterprises, essentially, we're trying to utilize your reserves until they reach what we feel is like a good target, a prudent target, just based on industry standards. And then once you get to that point, then the ultimate goal is for the rates to stabilize it. But for the solar project, it is to with those earlier rate increases, you're able to cash fund. In our model, we want to cash fund as much as possible. So we assume more cash funding than in the initial proposal Andrea had received, and to lower the annual debt service as much as possible.
Let me just maybe bring it back to what ultimately I'm trying to answer. I know that the taxpayer is going to come to me and they're going to say, what if we don't get solar? I don't want solar. I don't want to pay for solar. I believe that it's causing my rates to go up. If you scratch the solar plan, how much would my rates go up?
So we have the two
I just want to be able to tell them.
Yeah, there's two different scenarios.
Right.
We have the 7% for with solar and front-loaded, and then that's for, I believe, three years, and then it drops down to 6.5, and versus 6.5 annually without solar. But again, so the rates would be set where they are. Council would have the discretion to lower them if it seemed prudent to do that, in that particular year. But you would have the ability to go up to that amount, and yeah, I guess the bottom line is we don't know what PG&E is going to do as well. So I think creating a predictable cost, and with the proposals, I think there will be an ability to compare proposals and find the best one for the city, and hopefully we'll be able to bring that cost down over time, and the city council can decide whether 7% is appropriate at that time, or bring it down. But I think that in what we're seeing with the electrical costs, I think solar is going to be a pretty good decision. It's proving to be at the wastewater treatment, or at the water treatment plant. But that's my thought on it. So yeah, with the unpredictability versus predictability, I think it'll pay off in the end.
Andrea, is there a possibility that if PG&E rates continue to skyrocket, that even 7% or 6.5% wouldn't be enough? Assuming we don't do the solar project and we adopt the 6.5 annual increase, say PG&E skyrockets the way it's looking like they're likely to do, Will the council have to reconsider 6.5 and bump it even higher in order to cover costs?
Well, I think that's a great question for Eric, but what I'm thinking is that we would have less for capital projects. It would eat into our capital project budget.
Madge and then Jerry.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I was just going to say that that if it turned out that we just can't finance it, or the solar project turns out to be way more expensive than we thought, and we don't want to finance it, or we decide that it's not fiscally prudent, then we don't have to charge the amount that we're enabled to charge. You know, we can authorize that amount. But I think for longer term planning, it really makes sense to try to get that. And there also might be more grant opportunities out there than, you know, that if we are authorized to do that, we can pursue that too. So I mean, it makes sense fiscally, and it makes sense, I think, in terms of reducing our dependence on PG&E rates.
Everybody's going to want to do that. I mean, we're not going to be alone with the solar thing.
And it, you know, and as Andrea was saying, it's in its infancy. We don't have all the numbers yet, but that will come to the council when we've got more predictability on that. Yeah.
Yeah, what we do know is that we have, under this NEMS 2.0 program, our application is moving forward, and it's looking really good for having the project approved, and then that sets the timeline. So we would have three years from this past April when we submitted the application to complete a project. So if we decide to move forward with that, it's going to need to start rolling pretty quickly in order to meet that deadline. So I just wanted to add that, and I wanted to see, it seemed like you.
Sure, I can just make it really quick. On the question of how it will impact rates, it was, it's very preliminary numbers that we were using, but with the model we had in 5 years, it was basically the rates are the same. And really it's, staff will do more analysis on the project, but once the numbers are finalized, but it's looking at the financial analysis is basically looking at, you have this escalating cost. Can you take that capacity that you're paying for and lock it in basically at a debt service flat payment, so it's not escalating? If those costs keep escalating, then that would be your savings over time. And in the short term, we're looking at likely have, the scenario that was provided by that initial information Andrew was looking like the debt service payment would be about what the cost of that amount of electricity is today. So in the model we used, it was just basically trading one expense for another and keeping it flat over the time period. But I would definitely recommend doing, and I know Andrew's already working on doing the due diligence to get multiple perspectives and quotes and independent advice on the right route and the right provider for that. And as far as electricity, what if PG&E continues, there's a point where it could impact your ability to get as much debt financing. One of the key parts of what we looked at was the amount of your debt coverage ratio, which I will say is a big part of why the rate increases on the wastewater side. I didn't emphasize that enough. You have more outstanding debt on the wastewater side, so being able to have your revenues be a certain amount greater than your expenses is part of your agreement to have that debt. And so that's very critical to have those on the wastewater side, to have those increases, because it looked like you're actually slightly out of compliance currently, and so it's bringing you into compliance, and then the 7% is bringing you into compliance and giving you that cushion to be able to get some additional debt financing in the short term, which would be important if you want to do the solar project. But the electricity costs are only a component of your overall costs. So it's only if it goes up 30%, it's only a small portion of your overall, it's significant compared to other line items, but you have hundreds of other line items of costs that are going into the total cost.
Correct me if I'm wrong too, but the rate for residential in scenario 1 would be $945.74, and in scenario 2, it'd be $949.37, which is less than $5.
Correct. It's slightly allocated, the costs, the components that benefit from the solar project are more weighted towards the non-residential rate, and so when we plug that into the model, the residential is actually slightly, it shifts costs a little bit from residential to non-residential when we put in when the solar goes in and weights certain components in our model heavier than they were weighted without solar being in the model. So it does have that shift where residential actually is a little bit lower in the first year with the option 2.
Scott had a comment he wanted to.
Eric kind of covered it, but I just wanted to.
Oh, hold on, we need the mic for the.
Yeah, Eric covered. I think it was more clarification for Sabrina. The scenario 1 is 6.5% for 5 years, and then the scenario 2 is 7, 7, 7 for the first 3, and then drops down to 6. So it's about 32, 33% either way over 5 years.
Thank you.
So more of a statement that it sounds like either we're paying the bank to finance solar, or we're eventually going to pay PG&E for the cost of the electricity. I didn't want to come across that I was anti-solar, because I thought both scenarios, one puts it in that we get this project off the ground and we're going to go solar, and the other unknown is maybe we still want to go solar, but we don't have a project in place, so it's hard to quantify for what you're talking about. And yet I understand what Sabrina's saying, because some people are going to say, well, I don't have solar. Why? The deal is, I want to point something out. I don't think anybody's PG&E bill has gone down in the last 2 or 3 years. And I just read in the SAC-B that they're going to be basing part of your bill on income in the future. That's and actually you can't blame PG&E. The article in the SAC-B said it was something the legislature did for undergrounding of wires, and that's for them to build their kitty to basically be able to pay for that in the future. But so costs are coming in higher, and I just don't see that they're, out of the kindness of their heart, they're going to charge us less for electricity. It's one of those that it's just got to make sense for us at the time, and it sounds like you guys are doing your due diligence.
Yeah, and I just have one other thing to say, and it is addressing the point that the question you were asking earlier, and I'm sorry it didn't occur to me a little earlier, but the proposal that we received did set out some cost savings over time. I hesitate on sharing them because I really like to just do my due diligence and verify those numbers, but the numbers look very high. I mean, I think it was a projection of over, and Brian was in this meeting with me, but it was like over maybe a 20-year period, it was close to $10 million or something. So, please take that with a grain of salt. We haven't vetted the proposal or compared it against other proposals, but there definitely are, grants, there's tax-exempt programs that can help reduce costs. So I think that there is a lot of, that rate can come down if there are savings realized and we have a better outcome when it comes to the cost of the solar system.
I think for me personally, I've never been 100% pro-solar just for the look of it. It has to make financial sense to me. I've never felt so wealthy that I could just, pay for something because it looks good. So I definitely understand the concern of making sure that it is something that is benefits the taxpayers over the long run. But I do see as rates increase and show no sign of slowing down, it does seem to me that paying into something that will ultimately be an asset for the city and the taxpayers versus just giving money away to PG&E makes sense and does start to make dollar sense and not just feel-good sense.
I agree.
Yeah. And it's our job to communicate that as people come to us. So I'm just asking questions because I want to make sure that I can fully explain it, understand it, so that when they come and ask questions, we've got answers.
Yeah. Yeah. Is it time for a motion or not?
I will entertain a motion. I'm going to open it up to the public first before I make a motion. Okay? Yes, please come to the podium and state your name.
Good evening, Ragda Zakaria, 266 School Street. I would just like you to consider, I just paid my property tax bill, and I found on there, it says assessment for $880. That's on my tax roll. So that, of course, increased my property taxes. I was shocked. And I did call the city because it says assessment. And in my experience from other cities, when you use the word assessment, it starts at 1 year for a special project. You pre-collect money to do that project. But there is a start date and end date. So in your study, in 204 or 5, if you continue doing the assessment on the property taxes, it's going to be over $1,000 in addition to the continued increase of the property taxes the city is doing. So I think people is going to be shut. It's like crazy. So if I may suggest you could reconsider that assessment, I would like to know why is it an assessment with no ending date? And if that's your plan to pre-collect the money with the tax increase, just think over $1,000. I would encourage you to split it, like monthly bill, like the water, and send a water bill with the water and the sewer. Because I think it will be psychologically lighter on the soul of the residents. And remember, a lot of people are out of jobs. I understand the hike. And I would like really to see on your study, I would like to see an itemized showing what is costing the city of Willits to service the water and the sewer. Because if we are not in deficit, maybe you want to look at that too. That's all I can say.
Thank you very much. Manny, did you have a response?
Yeah, technically we don't control the wording behind how the county actually sets up the sewer charge. So it's not necessarily assessment as it is. Well, it kind of is. We're doing assessment based on the rate studies and everything like that. But that's what it is actually the sewer, the cost of doing business with the sewer.
Yeah, but
But it is it's done on a yearly basis.
Yeah,
You are
it's just
correct.
when I called the tax office, because I analyze all my bills, I'm new into town, it's like you need to call that number. So it says assessment. And like I said, maybe you want to change the word, but I encourage you not to add it on the tax roll because it's going to be crazy. I mean, in 24, 25, it's going to be over $1,000 plus took the property taxes. I encourage you to split it. I mean, I lived in many other cities. I always got two bills. Actually, one bill, one for the water and one for the sewer. And I think psychologically, instead of looking at $1,000 on my property taxes plus what they're doing, it's just suggestion.
There's also, whenever we do a monthly billing or something like that, there's always a chance where we don't get reimbursed or get paid for some of those.
But that's cost of doing business like any other city.
That's true, and that is the case, but with us putting it in on the tax roll, we are almost guaranteed the payment.
And that's exactly my point, but I want you to think of it, of people, how much money, a lot of them don't have jobs, or if you see it over $1,000 property taxes, it just doesn't make sense. And I would change the word of assessment, because legally it's not correct.
I'll look into it and see if we can.
Yeah, but just a suggestion, let's have two bills.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
I have a follow-up question, maybe Jim has the answer. I know that when I moved, I can relate, because when I moved from Brook Trails, I lived in Brook Trails for 20 years, and I moved to Willits, I was surprised that my water bill was so low in comparison to living up there until I received my tax bill, property tax bill, and I went, wait, what is this fee? So I'm just wondering what the historical, why, and possibly what brought about the need for the city to assess it on property taxes versus doing it the way do other cities do it where they do it on your property taxes and then are we the norm?
I don't know the answer to that question, and
Just curious.
I've been your city attorney for 20 years, and this decision to putting it on the tax rolls preceded my coming here. I'm not sure, maybe Jerry knows.
So, again, I think I stated earlier that we didn't own the water company first, so the city wouldn't have, normally wouldn't have billed your sewer bill monthly. They would have just sent the bill out, and I think that's why it's there historically. And then when we had the water bill now, whereas Brook Trails, it was a kind of created all at once. They had a sewer system that they basically created, that their idea was to pump it into the Willits system, and they collected the money up front. Because I lived in Brook Trails too, and it was like, wow, it got cheaper in town, but then I got the tax bill. I think everybody has that.
So for example, if I live in Cloverdale, do I get my sewer taxes on my property tax bill?
I think it depends on each city.
Yes, so I believe, and maybe I can better speak to this, because when I took this position, I was surprised that the city basically applies the sewer or wastewater fees to the county. It's not part of the tax, it's a tax statement, but it's not associated with the tax. The property tax is separate, and then your assessment fee for the service. I asked about it and inquired. It seems to be somewhat of a practice in California. And the most logical reason that I received an answer to is that, one, it helps on the administration side. When we do monthly billing, it's a Herculean effort. It takes 3 or 4 people, it takes various machines. Laura's can attest, if everything goes smooth, planets in perfect alignment, and all the little goblins out there want to work with us, it goes well. Chances of that happening perfectly doesn't happen. The second item is, and I think Manny was alluding to it, the county has the ability, so if someone is delinquent on that statement, it basically gets folded into collection for part of the property tax. So we're outside of that mix. We don't have to pursue a delinquent account holder. That's one of the biggest reasons to do it that way.
And didn't you say that we had quite a backlog, especially during COVID, of delinquent water bills?
And I will point to finance and the billing office. They have cut that down to nominal fees.
Yeah, but it's also been a lot of write-offs as well.
Yep. And
we have to let go of
installment plans.
So it sounds like it all comes down to collections.
Yeah, basically, yes.
Well, I think part of the problem is when you get it on an annual basis, it sounds like a really big number, but you would have to pay the same amount. It would just be done monthly.
Yeah.
But again, it's like the Christmas plan.
But maybe Eric also knows how common is this in California? Are we an outlier, or is this pretty standard?
And I can comment that it's fairly common. It's not just, I mean, most common form is monthly bills for both, but many cities have, especially in California, have sewer on the tax roll and water on a monthly basis, because also for encouraging conservation, water bills are directly related to the volume used in the previous billing period, whereas sewer is based on the winter use for your commercial customers, and then for residential customers, also because everything with sewer is an estimate. There's no metering the amount of flow out of your residence. So because it's an estimate, those are designed to be fixed charges, and because they're fixed charges, you can much more easily apply those to the tax roll, and it's a very common practice for cities that do it to have the sewer and not the water on the tax roll.
Thank you.
I just kind of want to make a comment that the cost of doing business also would mean that if we went monthly and people were delinquent, then when you came to tell us, hey, it's time to raise fees, a big chunk of your fees you're going to have to raise is because we are running at a loss because people haven't paid.
Right.
Is that correct?
Is there anybody else from the public who would like to speak? I would just like to say thank you for being here. This is an incredibly important discussion about rates that impact everyone in our city, and one person from our community showed up.
I just happened to come.
Thank you, appreciate it. Madge?
I would like to move approval of the recommendation with the solar option for the, whatever it's called, for that portion of the rate.
Could you speak up? Not everyone heard you.
Okay, I don't know what the right words, but it's approval of the recommended action with the solar option part.
Scenario 2.
Scenario 2.
Scenario 2. For both the sewer and the water. My recommended action is for both.
All right, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Does that allow, if for some reason that your magical grant thing or whatever doesn't follow through, then we just switch over just for the Prop 218 purposes?
What I would say is the rates would be set at the maximum based on the assumptions available. So if you go with assumption 2, the cost allocation will be using a solar cost allocation between the sewer rates. So the sewer rates themselves, the proportionality would stay the same. You could choose to not have them go up to the full maximum.
If it didn't work out, then we couldn't get the solar in place, right?
Yeah, yes, you can choose to have less than the maximum notice.
Okay.
Given any point in time too, we can choose not to raise rates in any given year, and that's what we did with COVID. We didn't raise it for the last 2 years.
All right, with that clarification, I will second Madge's motion.
Okay. We have a motion and we have a second. Dolores, may we have a roll call?
Councilmember Strong?
Yes.
Rodriguez?
Yes.
Stransky? Gonzalez?
Yes.
Mayor Condon?
Yes. Thank you for the presentation. Thank you, staff, for all of your work on this.
So I just want, for clarification, like you noted, the importance of this decision and public participation, there will be an advertised public hearing. So members of the public, you want to voice your concerns or your support or ask questions, there will be a second opportunity for this.
July 26th.
Yes.
Yes.
And everyone will be receiving notices in the mail, all water and sewer customers, and they will have the information available. All right. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
You can stay to 1 o'clock, remember?
It's just getting good now.
I mean, as tempting as that is, we'll be back in July.
Thanks, Eric, Ashley. Yep.
I'll need your caffeine now.
All right, moving on to item 10, department monthly reports. We receive these at the second meeting of each month. They are in the packet for anybody who's interested in hearing about them. We start with the airport. Kathy's not here tonight.
I can fill in if there's any, or Kenan, you were doing the boots on the ground type approach too, so.
Questions or comments?
I think the big item that we want to address is the improvements that have been done to the pilot shack. Thomas Gallops has done a great job up there. I think an email went out to the council in response to the recent, or last Sunday's experimental aircraft fly-in that took place. I guess the pilots that attended and participated in the event were thankful of the improvements we have made at the facility. So that was good. I also want to note on the downside, we are still in the depth of processing that Part 16 FAA complaint. Jim is aware, he's been part of the team that's been looking at it. We have retained an attorney back in the Beltway, Washington, D.C., who is familiar with the FAA procedures. This is a unique complaint format, and that's why we retain specialized counsel for this. Kathy is outside, she's actually attending a Sierra workshop and board meeting tonight and today and tomorrow. But her first priority is to compile all the materials that the attorney needs to prepare a response.
Okay, thank you. I will say, looked like some very positive feedback on social media regarding the fly-in day. So, good job, community supported. Move on to community development. Dusty's not here this evening. Does anybody have comments about community development's report?
I could pinch it as well, necessary. I just want to say thank you for the council's participation and contribution to the last meeting regarding the general plan. The consultant received a lot of good input. Building on that, there will be that special meeting on June 21st. It's at 6 o'clock, Dolores?
6 o'clock.
The consultant will be back. I think he may be bringing a second member of their team. This opportunity will be to kind of formalize some of the concepts that were presented to the council. How do you want your mixed-use zoning? How do you want density, spheres of influence potentially to accommodate annexation? So,
will some of the charts be updated to take into
yes.
account the,
yes.
I know Mr. Neary took umbrage with that.
Yes, they will be corrected.
Okay. Can we start that meeting earlier?
I believe polling the members of the council, 6 o'clock was the start date.
Do we expect that meeting to be as long as the initial presentation was?
I don't think so.
Okay, because I think that's Larry's concern.
I'm hearing what you're saying. We will convey to the consultant to try to keep it within, say, 2.5 hours, 2 hours.
The date again is?
June 21st, 6 p.m.
2 hours would be good.
Okay, noted.
Okay.
Well, in terms of how long it takes, I mean, it depends to what extent they want really specific feedback from us about direction to go. And obviously, this is not the vote on the land use plan itself, but if they're really seeking some nuts and bolts guidance from us, it does take a little bit of time. So
True. We're not going to try to rush you, but we will be respectful of the time commitment as well. We know these are pretty serious issues, and we don't want to burden you with, oh God, we got to make a decision, it's 10 o'clock, I don't know what zoning density is going to be and how we're going to support it. No, we won't do that.
the later it gets, the worse our decisions get.
Yes.
So it's probably good to keep it limited.
Any questions regarding community development individually?
I just wanted to say that I saw the item under community development on the Great Redwood Trail encroachment permit, and it's abbreviated as GRTA, which I read as Greta, and I was thinking, why am I in this report? And so, anyway.
Do you want to be known to be named after a trail?
I want to be in the reports.
Okay, all right, we'll work on that one.
All right, engineering.
I wanted to share the happy news that we've gotten started on preparing a plan for the striping. So it looks like we would probably hit about September for doing a striping project, and we're going to try to double up 2 years worth of striping to catch up. So we're targeting a $120,000 project.
That's the thermoplastic stuff?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's taken quite a hit this past winter. So I'm really noticing a lot of fading around town, and we're anxious to get that spruced up.
Is Main Street any part of that this year?
Yes.
Good. Okay.
So Main Street is included. There was a project for last year, but it got delayed. The plans were being developed in-house, so that it's getting picked up, and we're including areas of Main Street and Sherwood. The like twisty part is fading on Sherwood, so those two areas are going to get some special attention. And then I also wanted to share that we've got the solar project out as an RFP right now, and proposals are due on May 31st. So we're expecting...
For here?
Yeah. not the one we were just talking about. Yeah, City Hall, excuse me. And that will be a grant-funded project. It's a PSPS grant. So we will likely have a contract coming forward at the next council meeting. And bid openings for West Mendocino are on June 1st. And just a quick update on the roof. We didn't receive any bids, but we have been working with some contractors, and it's looking like we've got a positive path forward. No promises yet to secure a contractor, and so we're hoping to bring another contract forward at the next meeting as well.
What about the tank?
The tank. The tank is, the notice of award went out and we received some of the award packet. We don't have all of the items. So we're close to getting the contract executed, and then it would be a 10% initial payment. So we're moving forward on it.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Questions for Andrea? Okay, thank you. All right, moving on to Finance Department.
So the only thing I'd like to add is that I get the wonderful news of telling you guys that there's going to be a drop in revenue, sales tax revenue, about approximately 14% from the estimates at our consultants, Avenue Insights. So I feel honored, seeing as how I get to tell you about cannabis and now I'm telling you about this, so it kind of feels a little like, oh no. But the good news is out of this is that we have underestimated our revenues prior years, only to be pleasantly surprised by during the pandemic, larger than normal revenue receipts. And so that's why I kind of gave a little bit of a comparison between budgeted versus actual, but we've inverted. So the next step here is to kind of come back to you fairly soon with a revise so that we adapt and we don't continue to deficit spend and such. So we're reacting to this news, and we're going to be augmenting a lot of our spending associated with that, finding the areas where we can kind of cut our appropriations, and then we'll move forward with that and keep in line with what our needs are.
The 14% drop was for what period?
It was for fourth quarter of 2022. So we're a little behind on that. I tried looking up on CDTFA, the Tax and Fee Administration site for California, to see if they had at least the first quarter, so I can kind of gauge a little bit more, and it's probably not going to come out until about like next month or something like that. So they're behind as well.
I just find it interesting that a year ago when I was at the state capitol and I was talking about, concerns that I'm in the retail sector and I don't see things going well and I'm concerned, and state representatives were saying, oh no, if things are strong, it's looking good, we're doing well. And I was thinking, they're clearly not working.
They don't work retail.
They're not working retail, they're not working with the public. I was like, yeah, we better brace ourselves because it's coming. Because those of us who were out there working, boots on the ground, we knew that it was coming, and different segments of the business industry are seeing the impacts at varying percentages.
And there's segments inside it.
I'm honestly surprised that it's 14% and it's not much higher.
Yeah, for right now it's 14 until we get more numbers.
I wouldn't be surprised if first quarter we see that number change.
Yeah. So, and the bond yield curve is still inverted, which means it's switched. Borrowing bonds on a longer term, like a 5-year basis, you get less money than you would if you did it at a 3-year, which is usually indicative of a downturn in the economy. But it's been that way for some time, so it's kind of one of those things where it's kind of beaten the punch, but we haven't really seen it move forward. Go ahead.
Manny, question, if what's happening in Washington doesn't go as planned and the debt ceiling isn't raised, how will that affect us locally? I know borrowing will get more expensive.
Borrowing will get more expensive, but locally here we're kind of a little insulated because we're we have a lot of cash on hand, so we'll be able to weather it fairly well. Especially
Do we have
because
federal money coming in that we would not get otherwise?
it would be delayed. There would be a delay in that, but we would be able to cover it with what we currently have now until we get our payment back. So it's not a matter of whether or not it'll never get done. It's a matter of when it'll happen.
Okay.
Thank you. Anybody else have questions for Manny? No? Thank you very much. Thank you for bearing bad news. So nicely. All right.
More bad news next quarter.
Chief, going on to the police department.
Probably easier if I just walk up here. Little bit of good news from the PD side. I attended the graduation ceremony this morning at Santa Rosa Public Safety Academy to see our recruit graduate. His family, everybody was happy. I kept getting nothing but positive comments from the instructors and other people that knew of him when he was going through the academy, saying we got a good one and looking for big things from him. I met with his family and him this morning as well a little bit. We're expecting him to start next week. Swearing in ceremony will be on Tuesday, the 30th here.
What time?
Yes? No? What time?
Yes, I'm sorry, yes, it is.
Okay.
What time?
And we were hoping to have 11 o'clock. 11 o'clock.
What time again?
So
11 a.m.
Everybody's invited to meet him.
There'll be 2 ceremonies.
No,
No, 1, excuse me.
One.
I
Will
corrected
only be one.
because of...
Yeah, it's not a big thing, but it's a little bit of obstacles getting all of the medical clearances that are necessary for our second recruit, but we expect her to get all through that the next, hopefully week and a half, 2 weeks, and then we'll have another swearing in ceremony for her. So, our department, we don't have any other changes from the report. If you have any questions.
Do you just want to mention the vehicles?
Yeah, if you want me to. We were trying to get new vehicles per the fleet replacement plan that was in place 2 years ago, when right after I got here. And Ford is unable to provide vehicles to not only us, but to agencies across the state and across the country. They're really backlogged. So it was taking, even the vehicles we got last year, it took us 8 months, 9 months to get them delivered and then outfitted and everything. Our prospects for getting the budgeted 2 vehicles were very slim, a year and a half out, if we could get any at all, because we're a small agency and we're not buying in bulk. We're kind of put to the bottom of the pile. So we reached out to, looked around for other places to buy after I first checked with Ukiah Ford or Redwood Ford, I think it's called. It was not an exclusive thing, an agreement that we had with them. They said if you can get them somewhere else, get them somewhere else. So we found a place in Portland, Oregon, of all places, that it was a dealer that bought cars, police cars from other agencies, and then they would resell them. They are 2 to 4 years old, still looked good, so we went ahead and purchased 4 of them for below the price that we would have spent on the next couple of years with our budget. So we're in the process right now trying to get them outfitted and then put the wraps on them that the rest of the vehicles have. So they should be out and about hopefully in the next few weeks.
Fords?
Sir?
Are they Fords?
They are Fords, 3 SUVs, and we picked up a Dodge Charger for the chief to use, whether it's me or the next guy or girl. And then we're going to outfit that so I can cycle the one I'm using now back into either a CSO vehicle or a training vehicle or an admin vehicle, but hopefully it'll be for the CSOs.
And one of the patrol vehicles, which would be designated for patrol vehicles, is a hybrid.
Yes. Yes, so.
Glad the police department did better than the other people at the Chivys.
We were waiting for that, Larry.
Have you seen any improvements in the facility that we have from the county since you have another tenant in the building? Has there been any?
Improvements? No.
Any improvements?
No. We heard a lot of improvements going on upstairs, but.
But we haven't been the recipient?
Nothing's trickled down.
It's about time something starts trickling.
And I'm still keeping an eye on the wall in the back, that hoping that, telling my people don't.
And we just spotted a dead tree on the side of the building this afternoon.
And are we continuing to advocate with the county that we would like to see those improvements?
Yes, we are. I had a discussion, a informal discussion with Steve Dunningcliff, the Deputy CEO of Mendocino County. He filled me in a little bit of past history. I think what we need to do is just come to the table and say there's new individuals who would be negotiating and representing both entities, and put the past behind us and move forward. Apparently, some of the discussions that went place in the past was not taken in the best light on both sides, and they went separate. So we're trying to bring it back to the
I just don't
table.
want it forgotten. Our officers should have a suitable place a professional place to work in, and I know that the county doesn't have that building in the condition that's respectful.
Whenever I get new people to come in and prospective candidates, I say, this is our cozy little station.
Cozy station, that's what you call it.
Trying to sell it, yeah.
The county owns the lack of maintenance.
Right.
We own the community
We own the
pride.
land,
Okay.
Any other questions?
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
All right, Public Works Week.
Well, I just wanted to express a quick thank you to the Ojeda family. They acquired 6 concrete picnic tables for the sports complex. The city's own Amber Ojeda reached out to the project manager at Burger King and inquired the fate of the tables during their remodel project. And she was told, well, first come, first serve. If you can get them, you can have them. So she contacted her husband, who coincidentally owns Ojeda Transport, and he took some time out of his busy work day to bring his little boy down and haul the tables down to the facility, and spare time brought their forklift over and placed them around so that, visiting families and people that are there for the sporting events can sit down and enjoy a meal and watch their kids play. So just wanted to make sure, I know I briefly touched on it in my report, but I thought it was important to bring that up in the conversation today.
That would have been a good and welfare.
But otherwise, if anybody has any questions, I'm available.
Just for the benefit of Kenan, I know I was driving him pretty hard with the roof, with the margarita roof. The crew did an outstanding job. They put in the time, the effort. I keep commenting, I think we have a side hustle going on for roofing. There's a need, but the crew did an outstanding job. Kenan did a great job in overseeing it. So Frontier Days, they're going to be moving forward.
Great. Thank you so much. That has not been an easy couple of months dealing with the situation over at Frontier Days. And I think we're all very proud of how the city handled itself. So.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Kenan, Public Works?
Good job with rodeos, okay?
Thank you. I think we can all agree it's an important community event. I want to make sure that it's successful again this year. So.
Absolutely. All right, utilities.
Yeah, I just have one update on the annual flushing program is almost complete. We have about 3 to 4 days left. We've finished all of the west side, and now we're just at East Valley, and we're moving north on Main Street, and State Street will be our last, and East Commercial area, this little quadrant down here, and will be completed for annual flushing.
Well, good and welfare should be that when you flushed the system this time, it was light brown. Like it didn't spark a whole community of, angry people that they had dark brown water because the annual flushing, it wasn't the first time after many years. And so that was nice. People were just mildly irritated rather than very angry.
Does the brewery know that flushing will be happening soon in this quadrant?
We put it out on, we've been kind of short-staffed at the water plant as of now. We're coordinating with Public Works and Wastewater to fill in some bodies. So once we get that figured out, we usually give Kathy a post to put on Facebook for the areas we'll be flushing in.
Water's incredibly important to them. Might be good to let them know.
I know they put their own filtration system in.
Yeah, but they do feel it when the city flushes.
So we'll give them a heads up when we get to that point.
Thank you. Anybody else? Utilities? No? Thank you very much. All right, moving on to City Council announcements, communications, and reports. We skipped these last time because of the length of the meeting, so I'm sure everyone's got extra to tell. We'll start with you, Madge.
Okay, well, I did attend the most recent Sonoma Clean Power board meeting in Santa Rosa, and as usual, it's very impressive. They, by the way, they're on target to reach a reserve of, I think, 10 months of operation being in their reserve, which is a pretty hefty reserve, and they've only been in existence for 10 years. Built to that point. So they're feeling really proud about that, and they're looking forward to that enabling them to actually lower their rates. And those lower rates are their portion of what you get in the PG&E bill. So it's the electricity rate with Sonoma Clean Power is already 3 to 5% below PG&E's rate, and it is likely to come down even farther after they during the course of this next fiscal year. Their budget was really impressive. I missed a meeting of the Mendocino Solid Waste Management Authority, but it was pretty brief, and I read the minutes of it. It was very brief, and they basically authorized money for cleanup of illegal dump sites, which have been neglected for quite a while. So under the new management system with the private contractor and the city of Ukiah providing the administration, they're now going to tackle some of those illegal dump sites. And I did attend the EDFC meeting, but only unofficially because I wasn't able to be there in Ukiah, so I didn't have it. But I've just checked with Dolores about being able to attend officially from Willits, so I don't have to commute back and forth for all those meetings. And I think that's it.
Thank you. Sabrina?
I'm trying to think back because there's been so many different committee meetings, and there are, I think, 2 committee meetings. There's a couple meetings tomorrow. There's been quite a bit. The thing that's really been taking up most of my time is I know that many of us serve on other boards as well. For me, I'm the chair of the Mendocino Transit Authority, and we have kind of been doing some damage control because when these boards are formed, each city puts a representative on the board, and we kind of wear 2 hats. We're the representative from our city, but we're also representing all of the people that work underneath that entity. And so we have like dual roles, and we recently have some new appointees to the transit agency who are still understanding how they wear 2 hats and what that means, and trying to educate new directors on what you can and can't say, and decorum and all that sort of thing. So we've been encountering some challenges, and one of the challenges that we had is that we had at an MCOG meeting, in a public MCOG meeting, a statement made about Mendocino Transit Authority, and we're concerned, and we expect, wearing the agency hat and myself in that role, to be coming before MCOG to maybe correct some of the misinformation that has been put out in the public. So just giving you a heads up that you'll probably see me in my capacity wearing that hat, trying to correct some factual information. So, other than that, nothing else, nothing major to report. Yes?
I thought I read that in the governor's budget, there's no relief for transit agencies.
There's no what?
No, sorry, no relief for transit agencies as far as, I think they were asking for more money in the governor's budget as far as because of declining ridership, et cetera.
We're in a really hard situation because we have all these mandates to serve, but yet the funding seems to, there's like a new way of thinking, and as you heard recently, Brook Trails and Laytonville and Covelo, it's like, how do we serve these people and where do we get the money? And then there's been a thought out there in the public about, well, let's take some money from public transit and potentially move it over here, which Greta's going to be hearing about in her capacity at the MCOG. And there's merit to that, but then on the other hand, you have to take services away from somewhere in order to meet a need in another place. And then you start talking about how much does it cost to serve each person who rides the bus. And I'll be honest, at times it seems expensive to provide transportation in a public sense. But on the other hand, you have to keep in mind equity. So if you took this public transportation away that cost more per person than maybe we're comfortable with, you in essence might be taking away the ability for the low-income people to get to work, to get to health care, to get to school. And is that really the right thing to do? Should we be subsidizing transportation to low-income people, or should we say, hey, I'm sorry, you can't afford it. It's at a cost that's too expensive for us, and so we're going to go ahead and reduce some of that public transportation. So we're having a lot of conversations about not just about transportation itself, but in social, what do we socially think is appropriate? What does today's culture value? And where do we want to spend our money? And then trying to quantify and put that into good planning so that when we're coming to MCOG, we have a very clear vision of where we're going in the future and who is it we're trying to serve and what dollar amount can we serve this public at and how best to utilize our money. And sometimes when new people come on, they haven't had the opportunity to fully research the ideas and the vision, and so we're meeting some struggles right now with maybe some new directors not taking the time to digest and learn that information before they jump in and make a judgment. So I would hope that MCOG would be patient and ask questions and allow the organization time to maybe disperse that information to some of our newer directors.
I will say that MCOG also has 3 new directors.
You do as well.
And there has been a deluge of information.
Do you have the same struggles?
Poured on them. So I think that there are a lot of people right now who are really struggling to catch up. And
yes.
Especially in MCOG, which is just laden with acronyms, and they're flying at you a million miles an hour, and you don't know what stands.
And that's what MTA has, lots of acronyms, lots of different funding sources, and so you really have to be patient and not make quick judgments. And so the stability of like City of Willits, we haven't changed our representatives. Jerry's been with the same one for a long time. Greta and Larry, we've had that continuity within our city, and I think that's really important because other cities don't have it, and we're seeing the agencies and the boards that we're serving on, they're struggling because the other cities aren't having that continuity. So it'll be important for us to continue continuity to help stabilize these other boards and committees that we serve on.
I feel like I've said this before in one of these meetings, but it is interesting that before serving on city council, I was often of the opinion, throw the bums out. If it's an incumbent, get rid of them. But after sitting up here, you start to realize how long it takes to get your feet under you and really understand the information that you're processing. And longevity matters. And having people who have institutional knowledge and know the backstory on these important issues that come before us really is important. So I feel you.
Yeah. Are you experiencing any of those struggles with the agency?
LAPCO got some new folks. So far, it hasn't shaken out, so. And then League of Cities, they get new people, but honestly, I think Sarah does a pretty good job of corralling everybody.
And I heard you say in the past that your agency that you're serving on, some of the boards have had some struggles too with EDFC and others.
Well, I think EDFC, because not all of the members are public, elected officials, they have a mix of other representation, and there's been a fair amount of continuity there. And on the solid waste management, one of the new people used to be very involved in it, so he hit the ground running. He knew a lot of background already, and the other one is new, but we have a little bit of, and we need it because now we're kind of by ourselves. The board doesn't have its own staff, so it's a whole different can of worms.
Anything else, Sabrina?
No, just, it's not a city committee, but it is a committee that I serve on, and that is the Bond Oversight Committee. And I think that the reason that it's relevant to here is anytime a Bond Oversight Committee has the potential for or a bond has any questionary areas where there's community concerns, it impacts us. So if the city was unsuccessful in demonstrating that a bond had the proper oversight, it might impact the library, it might impact the county, it might impact the school district. And so I'm watching closely and participating in what's happening at the school district, but I am slightly concerned that it's been a year since we've had our bond oversight committee because we're lacking a quorum, and I've been really advocating with the school district that they need to make sure that we have a quorum. We had a meeting that was scheduled yesterday.
Rescheduled.
And it got rescheduled, and I had mentioned at the 2 previous quarterly meetings about my concern, and they weren't addressed, and then they weren't addressed. And then yesterday, or day before yesterday, I expressed concern that the meeting wasn't going to get canceled again, and in fact, it was. So we're rescheduled again for June 12th or 13th. It's a Monday.
I think what happened is I don't think they gave it much notice, so obviously nobody could. I think there were a lot of folks that made prior commitments.
They didn't.
I'm on that email list too, and
Yes.
apparently they I'm going to be working that day, and now
Well,
I
they
was one of the
didn't.
first ones to respond back and say I can't make it.
Many people never received the notification period, but I had asked multiple times to ensure that they were getting contacted, and there's some, they have some, I'll just leave it at, they have some challenges that is there, and I'm hoping that they're successful in being able to kind of clean that up and ensure that we have a quorum so that we can meet the provisions of the law which requires us to meet.
Thank you. Larry?
Car show, and Lions will do breakfast on Sunday, starting early, 8 o'clock till 11, I guess. And but the car show, which is a nice thing for everybody in the whole family. Nice family thing to go to.
Is Greta picking her favorite car?
Apparently I am. Yes, I got that assignment today. I hope there's a Dodge Charger.
All right, Jerry.
Well, okay, I'll be real brief. LAFCO doesn't meet till the 5th, and we are going to be picking a new legal representative for LAFCO, and it was going to be a selection committee, but there was kind of an upheaval with some of the folks there. And so now it's going to go into closed session, and all the LAFCO board will be involved. So I saw the email go out that they had sent some questionnaires to so that when we meet, there'll be a big portion of that meeting, I'm sure, is going to be closed session regarding legal. So the current legal person, staff attorney, is, I think he's had some medical issues and is trying to kind of cut back his clients. And the first person that's been pinch hitting in his place, she's one of the folks being considered, and there are a couple other folks. So,
Did you have to travel a ways for that last meeting?
which one? For LAFCO? No, that was Ukiah.
Oh, I'm thinking of League of Cities.
Oh, League of Cities, I was going to get there. So
Okay.
League of Cities is Fort Bragg. That was an easy one this time.
Good.
I do have I'm on the Public Safety Committee with the League of Cities, and actually that's the 22nd, I think, or the next day after our general plan meeting, special meeting in Sacramento. That one isn't the first in-person meeting. They've done Zoom meetings for that.
So you have to go there.
That one I'll be going in person.
I was just going to say thank you.
So-
Being on that board requires travel, and it's just, it's appreciated.
So, and then on the one I went to at Fort Bragg, just to give you a brief, they had, they did the business aspect of it was actually fairly quick, but they did bring in somebody to talk about the Great Redwood Trail, and the person running that used to run something similar in another location, and it was a great presentation. I think they're going to be kind of taking it on the road and kind of doing a lot more. And then Fort Bragg Police Department gave a presentation on their crisis response unit, where they have some civilians go out and deal with the homeless, and they try and get them services. And I guess there's a program called Project Home. So if you're from Kansas, that there's a fund, I think, at the state level, where if you want to go back to Kansas, they don't just put you on a bus and send you to Kansas. They call Kansas and find out that if you need services, that you're just not going to get dumped in that community. I think the state kind of learned, because San Francisco used to just give people a bus ticket out of San Francisco, but they end up in places like Willits, just because they said they might have sort of like Willits, and they end up here. So, and they basically go around. It sounds like Arcata had something similar. They called theirs Ambassador Program. There's a big trend in law enforcement to bring on civilians that deal with some of these folks, because it's not a police matter per se, and with a lot of cases it's more of a nuisance matter or more of a social services matter, but the county kind of falls short in a lot of places. I know in Lakeport they have a social worker that runs out with the police department, and they deal with a lot of the homeless folks and kind of tack in with some of this, because I was able to kind of brief them over there as far as what Fort Bragg's doing, and it's pretty similar to what Lakeport's doing. So, and that was it.
Can I ask a follow-up question? Chief, is there, talking about the whole social services component of law enforcement, talking about the whole social services component of law enforcement, do you anticipate or see changes in, or has there been changes in how social services partners with law enforcement?
I foresee some change, because that's kind of been the push throughout the state and throughout the nation, actually, but it all really comes down to a matter of resources. Fort Bragg's program, I think they got access to a grant, and we're able to institute that. I know that we are more than open to working more with mental health people. I've suggested in the past that we kind of team up and even have them come ride with us, a night or two, during the week and stuff, so we can handle those kinds of things. Or when we do get calls with either our homeless or people that are acting out and stuff, that they can deal with them directly and provide or offer resources. But it's just a matter of the staffing levels on their side. Is not conducive to that kind of thing right now, but we'll keep working, talking, and seeing if we can work something out. But the social services, law enforcement has been pushing back on getting us involved in that, because we're not trained, we're not equipped, we don't have the resources available for that. But we've been kind of a de facto agency to deal with those things. So. And unfortunately, our tools are very limited. we can
Maybe I
either,
can piggyback to what the chief's talking about. So one of the things that happens is, especially with mentally ill people, is that because of the, what's the medical term that you can't get? No, the one where they can't share information.
Oh,
HIPAA, yeah, so because of HIPAA, thank you. Because of HIPAA, a lot of times they can't access as law enforcement, but a social worker who's basically been cleared to receive some of that information can access it and say, tell you what, usually with some sort of connection, especially at the county level, they can get that. And it may be that you're acting weird, but it's because you're on some medication or you're on some diagnosis, and they can connect you up to services quicker than law enforcement can, whereas all we can say is they're acting odd and they're 5150, but that may not be the solution that people want. And so having these partnerships with these folks, it's just they've got to be willing, and there has to be a funding stream. Fort Bragg got a grant, Lakeport got a grant, and ultimately it comes down to, can you sustain it? Lakeport tried to do a federal grant and it just didn't happen. So they had a local grant, and so sometimes mental health will partner with you, sometimes it's another arm. In the case of Fort Bragg, it was, I can't remember what the source, but I want to say it was like some department of the state, but not dealing with mental health, had to do with like housing or something, that provided the money, and they were like, yeah, you're the only police department that's applied, so they seem sexy.
I'd be curious in hearing some kind of a follow-up in a year from now as to, how that affected their community, the quality of services in their community as a result
Well,
of
they
that
did give a
grant.
brief. They said they were able to reduce a lot of the calls because a lot of calls came to law enforcement, and now they initially with some people they send a cop out with the person, but the person does the follow-up. The idea was to reduce the load on law enforcement so they can actually go do. Because a lot of times, if you had a 5150 or something like that, you could get stuck at the hospital for several hours while you're waiting to hand that person off. And in this case, the civilians, if it's safe, take that load off the officers.
So is Fort Bragg then in a position where the funding has run out and they now...
No, they're still in the initial part.
cycle?
So they said they're going to probably have to, if they can't find additional funding, it's going to have to come out of the general fund, and then they're going to have to weigh out where they're carving it from and what will not be paid for out of the general fund if they go there. Then they're having to weigh how much of a savings is it been to the police department, and then you obviously get into that whole, well, do we not fund a cop to fund a social worker, or do we not fund a public works person to fund a social worker, or whatever?
and it all really comes down, any of these programs are all really going to come down to, we can offer the resources, but it's going to have to be up to the individual to accept them and to use them. And I fully believe that, yeah, you're going to have a vast reduction in our call load regarding those type of individuals or incidents, because it's only a percentage of them that generate, most, if not all, of those types of calls. We've gotten to the point, even I've gotten to the point that, a call comes out and they say they're doing a certain thing. Oh yeah, I know exactly who that is. Yeah, and so if we can get at least somebody that doesn't have a badge on that can talk to them and say, this is what we have to offer, this is what we see in you that you need, hopefully they'll a light bulb will go on and they'll be able to say, yeah, you're right, I need help.
In the case of Arcata, they funded it, I want to say, with like a business tax in the downtowns, but they're limited in Arcata because it's a geographic part of town that's basically funding their ambassador program, because it was funded, I think, by the merchants, partially funded, and I think they had a grant for part of it, but their focus is only on the downtown area, not, so they don't, when the call comes in that the guys at the other end of Arcata, they technically can't respond.
I can see the logic in that.
Eureka's got a pretty good successful program too, with a special team of officers, I think it was like 3 or 4 that were assigned with a mental health professional, and that's all they do. And they've had a good impact on the amount of activity and on the amount of people that are basically out on the streets and stuff. So that's also a model we can
And in this county, Measure B funded a partial program, but it was only I think the pilot was in Ukiah and I think Ukiah Sheriff's Department only in that area, but I think at one of the Measure B meetings that we attended, I'm not sure if you remember that, Larry, there was a call from some of the other areas saying, can we share the love up here? But I think at this point they've transitioned away from that. I think they're still just doing down in that area. I haven't been to a Measure B meeting in a while, so I don't know.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sabrina and I attended a Measure K meeting, I think that was the week before last. Now I've lost track.
I've lost track too.
It was the inaugural Measure K Oversight Committee meeting, and the 3 community members who were selected to serve on the committee were all there. We heard a report from Manny, essentially waiting for those audits to be finished so that the committee has some actual real data to look at, and but it was a good meeting. I think everybody's on board, on the same page, and although it's not a city committee, I did want to report that after that meeting, Brian and I sat down with Arnie Mello and Richard Willoughby from the Howard Foundation to discuss the Hale Creek Trail. As you all may or may not know, Dave Madrigal, the former Public Works Director here at the city, lives in Hale Creek subdivision and has been volunteer caretaking or stewarding that trail. He's moving out of the area and is concerned about trail maintenance, and so the city and the foundation are talking together to come up with a solution for that trail that I walked with Dave and is actually being significantly used by members of the community. So I'm hopeful that a good resolution will come, and it seems like all the players are working well together to come up with a reasonable solution for the community. So with that, we'll move on to yes.
Can I just add one more thing? Me and Larry did water wastewater committee meeting, and at the meeting we got an update on some of our projects. I think the tank and all this. And also, I think Pine Mountain and the Sherwood Tribe are interested in, Pine Mountain wants an emergency hookup, and the tribe wants to look at maybe eventually hooking up for the purposes of housing that Northern Circle Tribe, I guess they manage housing for them out in the valley, would do. But nothing, they would be approaching us at the moment just for an MOU with them, and you correct me, Ryan, if I got this wrong, but that basically they want to pursue funding, and the only way they can pursue that funding through their various sources would be to have an MOU in place that says that we would be interested in exploring that. It doesn't bind us at the moment, but it would be a situation that I think the idea was it would back to the it's going to come back to those entities to look at those agreements, and that at one point it'll come back to our council to look at and vote upon that MOU. And so, and the caveat is that it would not oblige us to provide that water, and each one would be done differently. I think the way Rod explained, one would be done as kind of an emergency hookup, and the other one would be done as a, basically if they ultimately hooked up, they would be ratepayers. And they're kind of in a different mode because it's the tribe and we're never going to annex them into us, whereas the Pine Mountain could be a situation where we might annex their system into our system. Is that correct? Is that
yes. So basically, there's 2 MOUs. The final drafts were reviewed by the Water and Wastewater Committee. They went back to those 2 different entities for their review and comments. So with Pine Mountain, it would be emergency intertie to basically charge their system when they're low. And then from that point on, there's an option where we would consolidate their department, their water resource department, into the city. We would basically be operating for them, and then ultimately would be annexation. But that's down the road. But that kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier about potentially our service agreements, LAFCO, sphere of influence, all those items.
And I think the advantage to us would be that we could also explore leveraging money for our system, because if they tie into us in their various formats, there could be some upgrades that we do to our system. Is that correct? With some of the money that could be leveraged through these. It wouldn't be, basically it might be a marriage, but a marriage that maybe comes with a dowry of some sort that helps our system. And that's the plus for us. But obviously we'd have to weigh out ultimately, as a council, do we want to do this or not in its final form when it would come back. But initially what may come to us is just an MOU. So it's basically, are we willing to entertain this in the future? Yes, and that way they can go off and pursue their funding. So that's what I had, sorry.
Thank you. Madge?
I just wanted to bring a subject up that has been on the back burner. Actually, it's been fallen off completely. Mobile vendors. And Sabrina and I used to long ago be a subcommittee to talk about that. And we ended up not basically changing the ordinance at all. And it's, anyway, so at least one constituent has said, what about mobile vendors? And my plate is very full, so I'm not sure that I could even serve on such a committee again, but it does seem to me it deserves being looked at, because our existing ordinance on that is very, very narrowly defined, extremely restricted.
The interpretation changed, which appeased people for the time being, but there is a need to revisit it again, and my plate is also very full, and we were the two committee members.
Yeah, so I just wanted to put a flag in the air if there is a possibility of looking at that. I think right now it's so restrictive that there's opportunities that mobile vendors might want to pursue that we aren't able to do, even with interpretation.
I'll bring it up with Brian at our next meeting.
Then we're going to move to good and welfare.
Okay, on Madge's orders, we're moving to good and welfare. Who's got good and welfare? Madge.
Okay, well, I just wanted to mention that Well is continuing to sponsor a gatherings called Building Community, and we're trying to bring different individuals and organizations to kind of cross-fertilize and know what each other are doing and avoid doing the same thing or duplicate or having conflicts, but also just kind of acknowledge that we're all working to make Willits even better than it already is. And our next meeting, which will be the third in the series, is going to be June 18th. It's a Sunday at 4 o'clock at the Willits Methodist Church. And we have working groups on housing, health, local food, land use planning, seniors, youth, and I think there's at least one other. So there's little working groups that are going to be reporting in, and then people can feel out where they want to make their contribution to making the city better by working on a particular topic area or a project. Dusty's going to make a presentation, I think, about the land use element, because that's clearly one of the things going on. Chambers involved. So anyway, we're trying to basically make sure that all the passionate groups out there kind of exchange information and work collaboratively, support each other.
Nice. And we're off to a weekend of sunshine.
Yes.
All right.
Very good. I wanted to give a shout out to the 3 people this afternoon, early evening, who stopped between North Street and Pine, and in between, or Pine and Laurel, North Street and Raymond Lane, who stopped to find a little white Chihuahua, blind, that was running so fast. I couldn't even believe how fast this old blind dog was running. These 3 people stopped and managed to catch the dog and get it home to safety, and it was just so great to see 3 community members who just were like stopping traffic to save this little Chihuahua. So I think Willits is just grand. All right, with that, we have no closed session tonight, and I will call this meeting adjourned at 9:28. Thank you, everyone.